100 Logic Pro tips, tricks, shortcuts. This video is going to be long, no doubt about it. And that's why I've timestamped all of them in the description below, and I've categorized them by category so you can reference them at a later time. There's no priority order to this video. They're not chronological. There's nothing going on where you have to watch it from start to finish. You can and feel free to come along the journey, but you can also reference this video at a later time and just reference the timestamps below. I didn't want to rush through the tips. That's why it's long, because I wanted to give detail on each tip and show you how to use it in context with your music in Logic. So that's why it's long. Let's get into it now. Stick along for the ride if you want to carry with me through the whole 100. And let's just start at the beginning. The first category is editing. Would be great if you could give this video a thumbs up or a like, maybe even a subscribe if you want to. It really supports the channel. This is the Logic song that I'll be kind of referencing these tracks and showing you how to use these tips in context throughout the tutorial. It's just a song that I've been producing recently. So before we get into this, you have to have advanced settings on. So in order to get to settings, I just did Command comma there to open that up quickly. But you can go to the top here, Logic Pro, Preferences, Advanced, Tools. And this button here, just make sure that Show Advanced Tools is on. It could be on for you already, and that's great. If it's not, your Logic probably looks like this. And it's like more of a GarageBand look. As soon as you click this checkbox on, notice the things in the background will change. And then we have all the advanced tools. So make sure that's on. It's important because we're going to be discussing all the things that you need with that on. Number one, might seem obvious, but use the tools available in Logic. Logic is a very thought out program, and they give you tools to make you more productive. And I've seen a lot of beginners make the mistake of just never using the tools. What are the tools? What I'm talking about is these three things at the top here. You probably only have two. I'll explain this third one in a little bit. So you probably have this drop down and this drop down here. This is what I mean by using these tools. These menus are the same, and you should get used to using these tools while you're working in Logic. What I would recommend is you having the pointer in your left click tool, and then in your command click tool, start using the marquee tool or the scissors or the fade. This is going to help you with editing. Here's a quick example of how you might use this in context. Without using the tools, if you wanted to, what I've seen beginners do this, if you want to go to this electric guitar here, and let's say you want to cut at bar 5. I've seen a lot of beginners do Command T, which is cut at playhead, which is fine because this is a GarageBand thing. But getting used to using the tools is going to save you lots of time. Instead of doing Command T, put the scissors tool in your command tool, and then whenever you hold command, you're going to get this tool. So you can have this be scissors, you could have this be a fade. See how I hold command now, and now I have a fade. You can have this be a marquee. The marquee is like a scissors cut tool. It's great for bulk editing. So for example, just ignore this tool right now. For example, I'm going to put scissors in my command tool, and I can go hold command, cut that. I can really cut things quickly. It's going to help when you're editing. And then you can use, because we have let go of command, we can now use select tool and move things around. This is how I would use this in context to edit things. So if you find yourself, you haven't started using these tools at all, or you haven't been holding command with your thumb and using the command tool, start getting used to that. That's a tip that most beginners don't start with, because GarageBand doesn't have this kind of thing. And when you start with Logic, you should start getting used to this, because it's just going to help you down the road if you start getting used to these shortcuts with the tools. Number two is, now we can talk about this tool, is adding a third click tool. This is not necessary, and this is going to be a subjective thing. If you want a right click tool, you can get that by going to Logic Pro, Preferences, General, and Editing. You can see right mouse button is assignable to a tool. You can also do other things with it. For me, I like my right click with a tool, but not everyone likes right click, because with a right click tool on, when you right click on something, you don't have the right click normal option you would have on a mouse. So you'd have to press Control click with your left click, and then that's when you get the right click options. It really works for me. So it is a subjective thing, but I like to have my right click tool be scissors, and my command click tool either the fade or the marquee, depending on, and this does switch depending on where I'm at in the process of making music. For example, in the editing stage, where I might be cutting and fading things a lot, I find it very valuable to have a right click to cut. So all I have to do is right click on something where my mouse is. So I'm at 4, I can just right click and I cut there. It's super easy to cut things. And then I can zoom in and fade it with my command tool. I don't have to spend the time going to at the top here and fading things like this, hovering over to grab the fade. I can just quickly do that because I'm holding command. It's worth just trying it out with the right click tool if you like it. I just love the option of having 3 tools really, really quickly available right at my fingertips. Number 3, which is we're going to stick on toolbar right now, is the toolbar workflow. So you can have, 1 or 2 tools, maybe 3 in here. But the other idea is because you're going to be using multiple different tools, use just the shortcuts. So what I mean by that is whenever you press T, the shortcut menu is going to pop up. And this menu here is what this menu is up top. It's the same thing all around. And it also pops up wherever your mouse is. So for example, my mouse is over here, press T, and it's going to pop up. If my mouse is over here and press T, it's going to pop up there. So it pops up wherever your mouse is. So you can really get used to this muscle memory of T and then sliding with your mouse down and knowing where things are. If you don't want to do the muscle memory way, you can just do the shortcut way inside of that. So you can press T, and then you'll notice there's a letter corresponding to every little one here. So if you know for a fact you want pencil tool, all you have to do is press TP in Logic. So let's click out. If I press TP, my tool is now pencil. If I press TG, my tool is now glue. TM, my tool is now mute. You get the idea. And T is back to pointer tool. So you can see them change at the top here. TG, glue, TP, pencil, TY, zoom. So let's use an example of how to do this in context. Let's say we're adding a new software instrument track and we want to put a region up here quickly so we can program some MIDI in here. So typically you might have to go up here, go to pencil, and click, and then you have a MIDI. But faster way would be, let's just delete that, would be TP, quickly, click, back to TT. And I do that a lot when I'm adding regions. That's a great contextual workflow example of how you could use that. Okay, number 4, let's move on from toolbars and get into some other things. Quick zooming option on things when you're editing. If you want to zoom in on anything, you have to just click the region and press Z, and you're going to get a huge zoom in on this track, on that specific region. So you can see loop 5. If we want to go over to this region, Z or Z, we say in Canada, you can press it and press Z again, and that zooms you out on any region you choose. So that's very handy if you're editing and you're like, hey, I want to check the timing. That bass sounded a little off. This is how we might use it in context if you're listening here. You're like, oh, that bass, that note sounds a little off. I'm going to press Z, zoom in. Oh, no, yeah, you're right. It was me. So I might now right click, cut that, and I can just drag this over a bit if I'm like, I want that to be a bit more locked in. And then I could fade it here. We'll also get into some more options with fading and that kind of thing. That was just a reference for you with zooming. And then we can press Z again to zoom out. Number 5 is while you're editing, you might have slow computer problems. This happens to me a lot of the time when I'm running lots of software instruments, especially paid instruments, and lots of plugins. My computer, the fans are running, it's going to blow up, and that happens to everyone, especially if your computer only has like 8 gigs of RAM. How do you fix that? This tip is talking about freezing, bouncing, and putting tracks on or off. They essentially do more or less the same thing. With me personally, I always bounce tracks unless I'm not convinced that I'm ready to commit to the sound. So let's take an example of how we might use this in context. Let's say we have a software instrument, we're running Alchemy, and we're running lots of paid plugins. So we have a paid compressor, we have more, sound toys, distortion, we have paid reverbs. it's getting pretty heavy, right? So let's say, and we have a T. I'm just going to make region T, P, make a region here, go back to T, T. I'm going to double click in and just put some MIDI in here. I'm going to go through some stuff like this pretty quickly and not explain things, but I'll always come back to show you what I did throughout the video. We have a lot of these tracks eventually, let's say. Things are going to get pretty intense, right? And all this shortcut stuff, don't worry about it right now. I'll show you how to do all these things later. So what you would do, what I do, if I'm working in MIDI and I'm producing, and I like the sound of these Alchemy synths, but I'm not convinced yet that I want to commit those sounds. For example, I don't know yet if I want to bounce them to audio. So what you can do to save computer speed is freeze these tracks. You can see these little snowflakes here. If you don't see this on your Logic, don't worry about it. Right click, go to track header components, and these are all the things that you can add on the track here. So if I take freeze off, it won't be there. So you have to go here, put freeze on, and then we can actually click and scroll down and put all these tracks, these Alchemy synths we want to freeze. And all we have to do is press space bar. And now this is going to freeze those synths. So because I did it on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tracks, this is just going to take a few minutes. So let me run that through and we'll pick it up in a second. And you can see, notice on every track, the plugins on the left, they're all grayed out. You can't click on them, and that's because they're frozen. So that means that your computer, while this stuff is being played, now this is going to sound terrible, by the way, so bear with us. So while that stuff is being played, the computer doesn't have to run the synth anymore. Essentially what has happened is this on the back end is now just audio. What Logic just thinks it's audio now, so it's not having to run any computer. So that's a good segue to talk about if you are for sure committed on the sound. Let's just unfreeze these. If you know for a fact you really like this sound and you're gonna want it for the rest of the song, just bounce it as audio, and that's gonna be the best thing for your computer. And in order to do that, you would go at the top here, File, Bounce, Track in Place, and you can replace the track, and you probably don't want to bypass the effect plugins, and you can have normalizes off. Now this is just going to bounce essentially this to audio, and your computer will be super happy because it's not going to have to run anything anymore. And you can see it's actually audio, and it's super clean, and it kind of actually looks better than MIDI as well. So that's bouncing and that's freezing. The other way to do it, you can go to track header components here and go to, where is it? On or off. I don't use on or off. Let's put it back on so you can see where it is. This button here. Essentially when you have that off, it turns it off, and that's supposed to help, I think, with the computer speed. But notice that the plugins are still available, so your computers still have to run the plugins. So don't be fooled by, if you turn it off, that your computer is having a better time. It's not. For your computer to have the best time, tracks need to be in audio. If you want to also help your computer a bit, you can also freeze the tracks. So that's how to speed up with computer problems and use it in context. Let's delete these tracks and get on to the next tip. Number 6, let's talk about chase MIDI notes. This happens when you are editing and you have a really long MIDI note. So let's just draw that in. TP to put up a region, back to TT here. I'm just going to make a massive MIDI note. Oftentimes I have these really long MIDI notes that just carry throughout the song. For example, it might be an atmospheric pad. So I'll just go atmos pad. And what the problem here is, if you are mixing, let's say, the pre section of here, and if we just solo the pre and this pad and want to listen to it here and press play, we can't hear it, right? We have to press it from the beginning to hear the sound throughout the song. If we don't play it from the beginning, we can't hear the pad sound. So oftentimes if you're mixing the pre-chorus, we're not listening to this atmospheric pad sound right now. And that's a super bummer. We can change that. So we can go to settings, project settings actually. That's a good thing to note out. In your Logic Pro, you have preferences, and here you have settings, but you also down here in file, you have project settings, which are different. and you can go to MIDI and see chase. And then if we click notes, that means that when we play this atmospheric pad now, if we solo it and play from the pre, we'll be able to hear it. It doesn't have to start at the beginning. So it's super beneficial if you do have these long notes. If you don't, not a huge concern. Let's talk about number 7, which is nudging things, which essentially means moving things left and right. And you can move any region left to right by clicking on the region and going Option left or right on your keyboard. But nudging things is based off a nudge value, and we can change these nudge values by right-clicking on a region, going down to Move, Set Nudge Value to. So you can see we have nudge left, nudge right, which is the command left or command right, which we just talked about. Then you have set nudge value to bar, beat, division, 10 ticks, and tick. So I'll show you if we just go bar, and then if I just delete this region, just so you can see this in context, and if I do Option left, that will move a bar from 11 to 10, now to bar 9, back to 11. So that's how you can move things very quickly. But what I like to discuss and what this tip is nudging by ticks, because this is going to really make if you nudge hi-hats and you nudge snares and your vocals by ticks, it's really going to help sit things in the pocket. Because if things are just way too mechanical and right on the grid, it's going to sound too mechanical, and you want a bit of fluidity, you want a bit of tick change, if you will, in the song. And so how you do that? Right click again, go to Move, Set Nudge Value to tick. And now if I go Option left, you won't see nothing you saw from this view happen to this region, right? But let's zoom in, and you can see before, if I Command Z, it was here. And I go Option left again, now it's before the beat. And you can see a little tick, I don't know if you can see that. It's right here on the cursor. There's a tick there, and a tick here. So I go Option right 2 times. Now this guitar is after the beat. It's laid back. This is a great thing to do with hi-hats. You can do it with guitars too, with vocals. It does come down to taste, but I think when you push it a bit by a few ticks and test it out, maybe you can go even drastically, maybe 10 ticks. That's why an option to do, because ticks are so small, that's why they do give you an option to do 10 ticks. So test out moving your hi-hats and snares 10 ticks here or there, or ticks here or there, to see if it flows better and if it grooves better in your beat. And that's what that tip is about. Tip number 8 is Command R, which duplicates regions really quickly. I'm using this all the time in context when I'm producing songs. So you can do this one region at a time or multiple regions. So if I have this loop here that I really like and I want to extend it, I could loop it and have this go like this. But a quicker way, in my opinion, is do Command R, and you can press it multiple times, and that region will be duplicated. The same thing goes in MIDI. For example, if we just have a region here, and I go to the MIDI editor, and I start drawing some MIDI notes in. This is a huge length from the pad we did. I can go Command R, and that's also going to do the same thing for MIDI notes. And then you can highlight all of them, go Command R, and that's going to extend really fast. Also works the same with multiple regions. So if I extend our session view here, and I know for a fact, hey, I really like, the chorus, so I want all this stuff, and I don't like that part, so I want all this stuff here. I can go Command R, and now it's duplicate that whole section right in time on the grid, starting right here. Number 9 is insert silence. Let's say you finished producing your song, but you forgot to make an intro, and you don't have any more room at the beginning of your session because you started everything too close to number 1. You could highlight everything, move it over. Sure, you could do that. Another way to do that is just go at the top here, cycle it, go to this drop down, which is your toolbar, more tools, I guess you could say, and then just say insert silence. And we do not want to move the tempo changes, so now we have another bar. You could do that again to get another 2 bars. And you can do that anywhere in the song, but now we have more space here without having to move over everything and making sure everything is lined up. It's pushed everything in regards to the grid, so everything is still in time. Number 10 is locking regions. So how do you do that? How do you lock a region? Let's go to our base here and we'd right click and go down to SMPTE lock, and we'd lock the region. So now there's a little lock here and we can't move that anywhere. So this is in context. This can be helpful if you have tons of regions and you're kind of scrolling back and forth here or there. This has happened to me before where I just accidentally move something like that, or even nudge it a little bit here. And I don't know because I've been scrolling and zooming. So if you are concerned about something moving, that's why that option is there. So you can lock regions. You can also lock tracks, but we'll get into that in a later tip shortcut. So let's move on to tip number 11, which is selecting all tracks. And I'm not talking about Command A. What I'm talking about is under Edit here, you can go select tracks, sorry. And here's where you can have an option to select tracks that are categorized, I guess, what they are. So you can select all audio tracks, and that's all the audio tracks you have in your session. You can select tracks by color. And this is how I use this in context. So I really try to follow some type of color scheme with my instrumentation. So if I want to if I know my guitars are blue, for example, then I can just go here, select tracks, and go same colored. Because sometimes when you have hundreds of tracks, you might have guitars at the bottom, you might have guitars at the top, you might have organized your guitars not in the same section because you might have organized it differently in parts. So that's how I might want to use that in context. I would select all my tracks. For example, all my guitar tracks, same colored. I could bus every guitar track out to a reverb. I could put them in a new aux track. I could delete all those tracks. You can also go up here and you can select all the muted tracks. You can select all the instrument tracks, all the summing stacks. It's just a bit quicker than having to go and search through the tracks and maybe click Command and click the tracks like this. If you color code them correctly, then you can do edit select all. Number 12 is the drag drop-down options in Logic. Here they are at the top. We have drag, no overlap, no overlap, crossfade, shuffle right, shuffle left. So what are these and how do you use them? And how I use this in context is with crossfade. So I typically would just have crossfade on here. And what this means is drag, whenever you drag a region into another region, this is what's going to happen. So you can crossfade, for example. Actually, now this is locked. We'll have to unlock this. Unlock. So let's go back up to our base here. And we noticed before in the earlier example that we might want to shift this over a bit, right? So let's just zoom in here. And what we can do is as soon as we drag this region into this region, it's going to generate a crossfade for us. If we just undo that and we change this to overlap, now when I go into this region, it's just going to overlap that region. And you can see when I click this region to the left, it's still there. It's just underneath it. For example, now it's underneath it. If I go back again, change this to no overlap, now it's just going to actually eat away at that region. And so it's kind of cut that for you. So there's different options where you might want to do that as well. But for me, and shuffle right and left is actually just going to shuffle these regions. So quickly, if I shuffle this, move this over, those regions are now going to be completely shuffled. I never use that. So I'm just using crossfades because like I was said before, if I'm listening to this bass in context, and I noticed, you know what, I want to just move this one over. I'll cut it with my right click, drag it in, and now it's crossfade. And I can edit this crossfade by just clicking Command because I have my Command fade tool here. If I didn't have the fade tool, I'd have to, like if, for example, this was a pencil, I'd have to go at the top and you can edit the fade here. It's fine, you can do that, but for me, I just like having it quickly here. That's just my personal workflow. Number 13 is using flex pitch for gain automation. This is really valuable for vocals or any type of audio that you've played and you haven't properly, or not properly, but you haven't played consistently and some notes are quieter or louder. So you want to adjust the gain. I'm not talking about flex pitch from the perspective of tuning things, just gaining things. So let's just cycle at the top and look at this bass as an example. In context, I might, actually, let's do the guitar. It's more, I think, realistic. So if I press E to open up my editor window and I go to track, I'll get the guitar notes here, right? And I can press this DNA symbol and turn on flex. And now I can go to this drop down, flex pitch. And you have to press the DNA symbol again to get these little MIDI notes up here. I don't know why you have to press it again. That's just how it is, I think. So we can see here, this is what flex pitch looks like. You might be familiar with this. And these are all MIDI notes. On the left dot of each blue MIDI note is a gain option. And you can increase the gain or decrease the gain of an audio signal. So if this is your vocal, or let's say this is your guitar, which it is, and you want to make this little note louder, you would increase the gain here. You could also decrease the gain. And you can go through your signal like that. In context, while you're doing this, it might be faster to do this in the region editor. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But if you are deciding to say, hey, I'm going to take a second and listen to this entire guitar track and just see if anything's pointing out, then I might say do it inside flex pitch, where you can quickly do it right within flex pitch, and you can actually gain specific audio from a signal. For example, you can cut this and you can just gain up this section, right? You can really narrow in on what you want to gain. I can cut that even more. And now I'm just gaining this. So it can be very kind of more surgical in flex pitch with gain. But I would say if it's just a quick thing where you're listening in context and you're like, ooh, something's jumping out too much, then I would go and do it in the region editor. And we'll get to how to do that in a little bit. Number 14, slip editing. Great while you're editing drums, bass, anything inside regions where you want to test out where the placement of the region. So let's get into what I mean by that. Let's take a look at this bass again. If I highlight this region and I go Control Option left arrow, watch what happens. Oh, it's set to my nudge value. So let me, I didn't mention that, right? So the slip editing has to be set to your nudge value. It's kind of like nudging, but you're not moving the region. So slip editing just means you can move the notes within the region without moving the region. So let's look at that. If I right click and just set my nudge value and move to, let's just say a beat right now. Then I go out and I go Control Option left. You can see the region is moving within the region. The notes are moving within the region. And so I don't actually have to move the region itself. I could just move the notes within the region. And this can be really valuable while you're editing to test things without moving the region. If you know your nudge value is set correctly, you can just click on the region and just go Control Option left if you want to try that at a different timing. For bass, I wouldn't do this normally, but I would do this for drums. Oops. Or, for example, my drums bus here. I can go and set my nudge value. I might not want to do a bar because the example I'm going to show you is just nudging it over a tick. So 10 ticks. So what I'm going to do is Control Option right. And that's just nudged everything over right within the region. So my region's still lined up nicely, but I've nudged all the MIDI notes over respectively within the region. Tip number 15 is using flex time. And we went over flex pitch just a minute ago. This is actually the shortcut of flex time. We're not getting into the editor flex time, but the session view flex time. So in context, what I mean by that is you can get to flex time whenever by just pressing Command F, and it's going to open up in your session view here under every audio track, not the MIDI tracks. For example, in context, let's say I just had my guitar plugged into the interface and I want to time it quickly. So Command F, I'm going to do, and I have flex time on. I'm just going to change that to automatic, and then it's just going to ask me okay. And then I can quantize it in the region here by 16th note, for example. and right away it's quantized. I know it's in time. It's good enough for me to produce around. There could be some bad notes and some artifacts in there, but I don't care while I'm producing. I just want something I can work with. And that's how I would use that tip in context with the shortcut for flex time. So let's do Command F to get rid of that. And we'll talk about tip number 16, I believe. Are we on 16? Yes, we're on 16. Tip number 16 is removing silence from audio. And you can quickly do that with any audio. For example, let's just take a look at this bass. If I go on any region and I do Control X, this is going to open up this window, and Logic is telling me, hey, I think I'm going to put squares around anywhere where I think there's audio, and then I'm going to delete everything else. And you can adjust where you want the squares to be. Like if we increase or lower the threshold, it's going to make the squares bigger. If we increase the threshold, it's going to delete everything. So find the sweet spot of where you want to delete silence, press OK, and now you can see that the regions are now split up and the silence is removed. You will have to have a listen back in context. Sometimes it really works, sometimes it doesn't, but it can be helpful if you just want to remove that dead space if you need to. For vocals in context, I wouldn't ever really do, because I like to do it manually just because the lead vocal is such a prevalent thing. And so I would go do it manually and then do my own crossfades. But for bass, guitars, things that you don't need that dead space in, it's fine to do that. It's also not completely necessary to do it on everything if there's no noise, right? For example, this was a MIDI bass that I just bounced to audio, so there's no noise in between. Right? So you don't need to do it on these kind of things. You just need to do it on things that have noise. Number 17 in editing is the snap feature, a really valuable feature that will help you improve your editing. It's at the top here. Beside drag, we have snap. We have an on-off button too. You can turn it off, you can turn it on. I always have it on, and it's usually on smart for me. But it changes when I'm doing some type of editing. So what is snap? Basically, snap is in regards to your regions. So Logic will help you snap to certain areas on the grid. For example, if we have this set to bar, and I try moving this bass to bar, or this to where the cursor is, Logic's not going to let me do that because I've set it to bar. It's going to push me to 22. So let's try. See, I'm scrolling over and I want it to land on the cursor, but I can't. So if that's happening to you and you're like, what the heck is going on? It's likely because your snap is set to bar. So move it to smart, or if you know for a fact you're working in divisions, then this can be really helpful because you know for a fact every time you scroll right, you're going to go to the next division. Or for example, beats. And every time you scroll, you're going to go to the beats. So if I did know I want to the cursor, I can just go 2 over. And now I know for a fact I'm on that beat. I don't have to worry and zoom in and be like, am I on time? For example, if I'm working with my drums in the drum bus here, I know for a fact that I want my snare drums to be on beats. So if I'm working with the snare region, like for a while, I can go to beats, and I know every time I scroll left, it's going to go on the beat because I know I want my snares on beat. If I'm on smart, that's okay. It's not snapping me to the beat, right? So, it can be faster if you know for a fact you're working in beats. Just go like this, and it's going to help you snap into place, and it's just going to be a bit faster. Number 18 is triggered MIDI editing. So what this means is, and in context, if we add 2 more of these alchemy synths here, and I'm going to delete this region, and I'm working with software instruments, right? Okay, so if I put these in a summing stack, and the shortcut for that is Shift-Option-D, now each of these synths, synth 1, synth 2, synth, okay, that's the synth, and that's a synth. Synth and synth are now in this bus. So if I make a region inside here, on the summing stack. That means, and whatever I play in here, it's going, I'm sorry about the sirens, it's pretty busy in Berlin today. And I'm not worried about the sound here, but let's just program. I don't even know what I'm programming in. It doesn't really matter. Watch when audio is going to come out with all of these three instruments because it's going to be triggered by the aux track. I only have to program one track MIDI, and then all these other tracks inside here are going to be triggered. So why you might want to use this in context? Well, if you know certain instruments share the exact same MIDI, then you can save time by programming only one MIDI because you know that synth 2 and synth 3 are going to be sharing the same MIDI, because sometimes it's nice to layer different types of synth sounds that share the same MIDI. Okay, let's remove this bus, Command backspace, and get on to number 19, which is now inside the piano roll editor. So we will primarily work with MIDI. So I'm going to add a new software instrument track and work with this MIDI region. Now, if I press E and open up this region, let's get into some tips and shortcuts inside here. Let me quickly just play something on the piano so we can work with something here. Something's just super simple just to get the concepts down, not worried too much about the actual sound, right? So the first thing is velocity and the velocity tool. Now you can notice we talked about tools at the beginning, and there's 3 tools, at least I have 3 up here. There are also tools here that are different. They're independent of these tools. They can be different. So for me, I have the right click tool here as well, but I always have it as velocity. So that means I can just right click on any MIDI note and drag down and change velocity, drag up, and it's getting hotter. This is super valuable because I'm always changing velocities in context, because I'm programming a lot of MIDI in. And when you program MIDI in, for example, with the pencil tool, if I just hold Command and I'm drawing MIDI notes, they're all green when you program them in. So that's not cool, right? When you're making music, you don't want everything to sound the same. So when that happens, when you program them in, just right click and scroll down, change the colors a bit, and now you're getting more of a humanized sound. So that's that tip. Try it with the right click tool if you're comfortable. You can also have it here in the command tool, and you can go hold Command and just do it that way if you're more comfortable with it. The other way besides that is you can just click the note and go over here and do the slider, but we're here for tips and shortcuts. So I do recommend the right click. So tip number 20 is quantization. And you've likely heard of quantization before, and I'm going to explain how to do it quickly. So let's say I played this on the piano, which I did, but I've already quantized it. Typically, when you play things on the piano or on the keyboard, you're not going to play them in time, and that's completely normal. So this one would be here like this, and this one would be here like this. So a quick way to do quantization, it's always set to the value over here, by the way. So if we know that we want these notes to land on bar 11, 12, 13, 14, like on the bar, we have to quantize by a whole note. So it's Command A, and we can just press Q on our keyboard, and that's going to correspond to this note. So I just press Q, and then everything's moved over. Now, if you have 1/16th note, if we just move back, and this was to 1/16th, and you did Command A, Q, you see how it mostly worked, except this one didn't go over. That's because everything is jumped to the nearest 1/16th note of how you played it. So if you played this not close to bar 11, it won't be able to jump to bar 11 unless you choose a whole note. And then we can go and Command A and Q again, and that will jump over. Don't worry too much if you don't know these yet. As soon as you start working on quantization and doing it, you're going to figure these things out really quickly. Now that's quantization with chords. Let's say, let's just make another copy of a region, the copy of this region. I'll explain how to do these shortcuts later, don't worry. And I'm just going to delete this. And let's say we actually have a melody. So something like this. And Command R, we can do Command R because we've learned that shortcut already. And our melody is like this, okay? Now, some notes are longer, some notes are shorter, and we played it also on our MIDI keyboards. Now we can do Command A to 1/16 notes and press Q, and that's going to lock in everything to the 1/16 note. I usually do 1/16 when I'm playing melodies, and that's because you're going to likely play within a 16th note while you're playing it on your keyboard if you're play mostly in time. Now, just to explain the whole notes thing again, if I did whole notes with this quantization, everything is going to jump to the whole note. So that's 23 and 24 and 25. So don't worry if that happens and you automatically did that. You can just change it back to 1/16. All this is doing, this thing here, is moving it to the closest bar thing. So let me zoom in here. So 23 is a whole note. 24 is a whole note. These in the middle, these are quarter notes. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, a quarter, 4 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, a quarter. If we zoom in more, you can see in between here, there's going to be another 8th note. Just zoom in, they should be able to see the grid. I don't know why we can't see the grid. Well, that's too bad. Anyways, the 8th notes and 16th notes are in there. Let's listen. What a masterpiece. And if that's how you want it to sound, then you've quantized it correctly. It's all about the feeling at the end of the day. Tip number 21 is making all the MIDI notes the same length really quickly. So sometimes if you are playing the MIDI notes on your keyboard, it might look something like this. They're all a difference in length, right? Totally normal. However, if you are using a synth and you want the notes to be all the same, then in order to do that quickly, instead of going one by one and making them all like, let's say you want them all like a bar long, right? You can highlight them and extend them out and bring them back in. But a quick way to do that, Command A, then go Shift, Option, then hold on any one, doesn't matter which one, and extend it to the bar, let go, and now they're all the same length, they're one bar. So I often am doing this in context with the synth. So let's just, if we change the sampler to a synth and solo this. And now they all run into each other perfectly. So this is tip number 22. And it has to do with the paintbrush tool, making primarily hi-hats in context is what I use it for, but you can do it with other things if you have different ideas. So I'll change this to my paintbrush tool. And you know what? I'll actually do it with a hi-hat. So I'll change this software instrument in my library to a drum kit. And any drum kit, it doesn't matter right now. I'll press Y to have that expand out. And I'm going to zoom in on this region here. If I go here, sometimes if you notice no names here, you can zoom in, and then the names will show up. So these are all just some extra tips here while we get into the actual tip. So let's just go to our hi-hat. Where is it? Hi-hat closed. And we want to paint in an 8th note hi-hat. So we'll go here, 8th note, and I can hold my command tool to get my paintbrush. And you might be familiar with this, right? You can just go along the lines and record a hi-hat in like that. Now, what happens sometimes is you just, you go up here and then you don't get a straight line. So to fix that, just hold Shift and it will go straight through. And now there's a little tip, an added tip while you're holding Shift. So while we hold Shift and we go down, I'm automatically changing the velocity and go up and I'm making it hotter. But I'm going straight. So you can kind of like wave, and I can go back too if you mess up. So you can kind of like with your hand, like wave the shape of the velocity that you want. So I'll just delete that and you can, like I said, you can go back. So I might want it harder at the beginning, softer, harder, softer, harder, softer, something like that. And if you're like, oh, I messed up, go back and just do it again. Oh, I scrolled too far. So it just gives it a bit more of a human feel if you do it like that, instead of the other way where it's just like straight reds. That's going to be very machine-like. So do that little shift tool. And I'm mostly doing this with with hi-hats, but you can do it with anything else. Number 23 is doing force legato in piano roll. It sounds super theoretical, but it just means having MIDI notes run into every other MIDI note. So if we change this Brooklyn track software instrument to a bass track, open up my library by pressing Y, go bass, and we'll just do a subby bass. Press Y, bring that back. And I'm just going to change this to pencil, press Command, and draw some notes in here. I can also preview it if I press this green button on. Side tip to this, if you do Command A and while you're making all the notes the same, if you actually are holding Shift Option and do the velocity change at this moment, it's going to make all the velocities the same. So I just scroll down. Now all the velocities are at 20. Now all the velocities are at 127. So that can be really valuable if you are working in a synth instrument, for example, in these chords here. Oh boy, we're getting a bit off topic on this tip. We're going to go back to it in a second. It's a little bonus tip for anyone who's made it this far in the video. I'll do Command A, and then you notice how I made those all the same, right? So Shift Option, made these the same. Now velocity, notice how they're all different, and if I want them all to be 127, I can't go over here, Command A, and scroll up to 127, because that's only going to make the relative change in all of these. What I have to do is Command A, Shift Option, then scroll down, because I have my velocity tool, my right click, and now they're all red hot. Okay, back to this tip though, where we're talking about force legato with a bass track in context. So maybe you played the bass on the MIDI controller and it looks like this, and you have a bit of a bass line. And you want all the notes to run into each other. Well, you can't do Shift Option like this because you don't want them all to be the same length. You just want them to run into each other. So what you have to do there is Command A, right click on one of the MIDI notes, doesn't matter which one, and then you can go trim note end to selected, forced legato. Now that's going to move every MIDI note into the next one, so there's no space and there's no dropouts. I'm doing that most of the time with bass because I don't want the low end to drop out at all. Or maybe you have a synth melody, you have a piano part. If you don't want any dropouts and you don't have a sustain pedal, you didn't program a sustain in, then you can do forced legato to have those run into each other. Number 24 is how we can make a couple things on how we can make MIDI feel more human. Let's go back to our region here where we have our chords. Now, this would not be human. It's all red hot. And let's change this back to a piano. Piano, Yamaha, and press Y to get rid of this area. So the first thing is velocity, and we already touched on that. So you would go through these and maybe bring the entire velocity down. Just going to take the preview off so it's not super annoying. I would change the velocity of each note respectively. That's the first thing to make MIDI feel more human, but we've already talked about that. The second thing would be timing and having things not completely quantized. So you can do a couple things with that. You can do Command A, and then we have the options to decrease the strength of the quantization. So notice how they're all moving to the right. And if you just go now go to taste, if you go too much, it might just sound out of time. You don't want things out of time. You just want it to sound a bit more human. So bring that down a bit. That's going to make it sound a bit more human. And also in the region editor is where we have more things where we can make our sound more human. So up here, drop down, we have these things: Q velocity, Q length, Q flam, Q range, Q strength. All of these Q things have to correspond with this value up here, quantize. So if we turn this on by 1/16, the whole note, now everything's quantized, you see, like it was. But we're at 70, let's say. And we have now the option to change these. Flam is cool. Flam is like when you play the notes kind of like a trill, like one at a time. And I'll show you what that means. If I increase the flam, you can see the notes are played like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you push the flam too much, it sounds weird. So maybe just go, 20 ticks. And now every note is not played the same, and that's what humans do. We don't play every chord the same. So you can also cue the length. Maybe make not every note the same length. You can also change the velocity here. You can also change the strength of the quantization here more and the range of the quantization. Go in here and change the cue values until you think your MIDI sounds more human. And by all means, you don't have to do any of this if you want more mechanical MIDI. I wouldn't do any of this if you want more mechanical MIDI. Number 25, 1/4 way through, is MIDI in and MIDI out features in the piano roll editor. It happens to do with these two buttons here. What are they and what do they do? So this one to the right is MIDI out, which means it's technically a preview. When you put MIDI notes in, you'll be able to hear them, right? And when you click MIDI notes, you'll be able to hear them. This is super valuable sometimes when you're programming MIDI in. It's also super annoying sometimes when you're editing MIDI, so you can turn that off. MIDI in is a really cool feature if you're programming MIDI in as well. For example, let's delete this. If you have your MIDI controller here and you just click on a note, it shows up. So if you know for a fact you want to play a G major chord, there's the G major chord. And then you can go in and extend it and line it up. If you know on bar 12, you know I want an A minor chord. It shows up right on A minor. So in context, you might be like, I know a progression I really like. It goes A minor, and then, oops, whoa. A minor, then on bar 12, it goes C, and then on bar 13, it goes F, and then on bar 14, it goes G. So now you have all the MIDI data in there, and then you can use all the things that we just talked about, like Command A, Shift Option, moving them all the same length. Then change the velocities a bit. Now here's the thing. Because we MIDI'd in those notes, we didn't play them, right? So we put them right on the bar. You can't really, you notice if I moved when I moved the quantization of this note, or all notes, down, it doesn't change. And that's because we didn't play it. So there's no reference point of where to bring it back to. So the MIDI in feature is really valuable if you are more comfortable programming MIDI in with your keyboard versus the mouse. Number 26 is more features in the region editor with regards to MIDI, but also more valuable, in my opinion, for audio. So let's move on from this Yamaha Grand and go back to this electric guitar. So with this guitar, we can do multiple things within the region editor. Without going into everything, what I want to focus on are fades, gain, and reverses. So we mentioned previously in the video on another tip to use flex pits for gain automation on some things. The quicker way to do that, if you are listening in context and we're listening to this guitar, and I'm like, you know what? I would really like this part here just to be a bit louder. I can go ahead and right click and cut this. You see what's happening here is because I have my snap on beat, it's not letting me cut the division. It's snapping right to bar beat 17, and I don't want that. So I have to go back here and turn this to smart. And now I can cut in here. And then I can increase the gain by clicking and dragging up. And the click drag functionality is in a lot of places in Logic. So you can also click and write something in 10 or 1. But just you can click and drag down or click and drag up, and then that will increase the gain. This is a lot faster than going into flex pitch, right? And turning that on and having your computer run flex pitch. So if it's just a couple things here and there, I recommend cutting the region and doing the gain automation in here. So that's one thing I use a lot with the region editor. The other thing is fades. Whenever you do fades, for example, I have the command tool, I might fade this, and then I might crossfade this. Here in the region editor is where you can edit the fades too. So I can go here and you can see a fade in at 113. If I want a larger fade of 1000, now we have a big fade, and I can edit it here as well. So this is where the fades are coming from. We can also edit a curve here. We can make it a curve, 10. We can also click and drag up and increase that curve. Click and drag down and inverse the curve. So this is where you can edit fades, or you can actually just do fades at the beginning if you want to completely get rid of it. And you only want a little fade, so just one, because you can hardly see it here, right? Sometimes that's good. If there's just a pop that's happening, like if there was just a tiny little pop on this guitar, then, but I don't want to ruin any of this transient. Like I don't want to have a fade like this because I want that audio to be played. Then if you don't want to dissect and go into it so surgical with your tool, just go over to the region editor and click in 1. The other thing is reverses. So let's take this little note here. And let's say I want that to be, use this part as, I want to reverse that audio to create some tension going into this actual guitar part. What I can do here is duplicate this track, Command D. I can duplicate this region, and I'll get into these shortcuts in a little bit. I don't want to overwhelm too much. But the idea is you make a copy of this region, come down here, and then you have a reverse checkbox here. Just click that, and now this guitar signal is reversed. If I just solo this out. And I might not want this this one at the beginning, so I'll just cut that. And then I'll fade it with my command tool. And I will line it up here. I'll move it over a bit. I'll fade it out. Now coming into this section, we have something like this. Not too worried about the production. The concept of how to reverse is really easy because you can do it in the region editor. Let's move on to 27, which is also a new category. It's talking about production tips. And the first one, and we did kind of reference it when we were talking about region locks, track protection. So track protection is basically in track header components, we can lock an entire track. So if we're really scared that something is going to change, we can lock it. And that's the purpose of that while you're producing or mixing and you really like something and you don't want it to move. So let's say we're really in love with this bass sound. It's like super awesome bass and we don't want anything to be touched. We go to track header components and it's under here. It is track protect. And because we have a check mark, it's already on, which is this button here, lock it. And now this entire track is locked. We can't move any of these regions. I'm trying to move them, but it's saying you can't do that. It can be really handy sometimes if you have a track with 1,000 different regions, or you have a track where you made a vocal comp. And in context, that's how I would use it. Sometimes when I'm comping vocals, I might have a vocal track here with, maybe 60, 70, 100 different regions because I'm comping different things. And I don't want any of that to be moved timing wise because I've locked it in. And if I just happen to move a mistake sometimes and click my mouse somewhere, I'll just protect the track and then I can kind of rest my mind that nothing will be changed. So I'll just unprotect that right now and move on to tip and shortcut and trick number 28, which is groove tracks while you're producing. So if you're just starting a song and you have a bass groove you really like, or you have a drum groove you really like, you want that to be the principal groove of your song, you can set that and tell Logic to have other instruments move to that. So let's say we love this bass groove. And we want things to groove to that. So what we're going to do is groove track. It also has to be in track header components. So we right click, track header components, and then there's this thing down here called groove track. So if we click that on, nothing's going to happen here. So you have to, but you notice when I highlight over these colors, there's going to be stars. And this is what has to do with groove track. Basically, I'm going to click that star. And now when it's a star, that's the groove track. And you're telling Logic, make other tracks groove to this track. So, for example, let's say I want the electric guitar to groove to it. Then I click the electric guitar. Nothing else will groove to it unless you tell it to groove to it. And now, Logic is going to make that move a bit more. And you can also tell Logic how much you want to move the track to the groove track. So if we go up to the region editor, you can see already quantized bass. It's quantized to the bass, and you can increase the strength of that quantization. If you don't want it to be moved that much, put it down to 0. If you're like, I want it to be moved 65%, then put it to 65%. Same thing for drums, same thing for piano, anything that you want to groove to your groove track. First set it up with a star and then click the check boxes, and then you can tell Logic how much you want it to move to the groove track in the region editor. Number 29 is stretching audio. This is great if you are importing samples. For example, let's do that right now. And for the purpose of this, I'll just import a Logic sample, just an acoustic guitar here. Let's say we got this from Splice or from the internet or a pack or something. This is the same. The principle is the same. We basically drag the sample in. I'm just going to drag it up. I'm going to solo it out, and I'm actually going to get rid of the groove tracks right now. Track header components and just get rid of groove track. So let's just have a listen to this guitar. Actually, Logic loops aren't great for this because they put everything in time. So I will open up Splice because I want something just a little bit out of time. I'm just going to delete that, and I'm going to just search piano, and I'll just put a piano part in, not worried about the sound right now. But the purpose is that here, you can see this piano part. It's not in line with our tempo. It's not on the grid. We want it to be flush with the grid. So in order to, the shortcut for that is hold Option, and you're going to get a bracket with squiggly lines on each end, and stretch it to the nearest grid and let go. Now it didn't work. We stretched it the wrong way. I think it's because I was just lined up on the grid. We want it to be like this. We're going to stretch it in for these 4 bars. That's really going to speed it up. Let go. Have a listen with the drums. Now it's really killing the quality of the piano. You can hear that. So that's a perfect example of you cannot stretch everything, because the original piano is in 75 and we're going to 90. So we're really killing a lot of the quality. So you can't stretch and put everything in time, but that's how you would do it. Hold Option, get the squiggly brackets, and then move it over to the grid. Tip 30 is transposing audio. So same idea when you are importing samples into things, or maybe you want to shift the entire key of your song because you want to sing it in a different key. So you want to transpose it up or down. Very easy. Let's do it to this piano again. So it's in C major here. We can see it. But we want to put this down. So we want this actually in B. So what we can do is Option and go down arrow. And now this is actually in B. So if we want to go C sharp, we go Option, up. Oops, sorry. Option, I did Command. Option, up. Now it's 1. So now it's C sharp, a transpose up. And you can keep going 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, up as high as you want, down as low as you want. If you want to go octaves at a time, you can go Shift Option down, and that's an octave down. Shift Option down, Shift Option down, Shift Option up, 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 up by 12. So in context, I'm doing this with samples. If I bring a C major in, but I know my song is in B, then I know I have to go down 1. And now I'm in key. Now, the other way I do this is if I have a piano part here, down here, right? What I might do, I'm just going to cut that there, is I might actually say, I like this piano, but now I want another synth, but a lower octave. So I might do Command D, bring this region down, and do Shift Option down. So now this is the same chords, but this one is a lower octave, so it's going to give just a more rich feel. Not a good example sound-wise, but a good conceptual example of how you would do that in context. I do that a lot of the time. I probably did it with these synths down here. When I bounce these, I probably used the same MIDI for the Juno and the keys, but I would have transposed them differently up different octaves, so they're in different areas in the stereo image, so you can have more space covered. You can also do this in the region editor. Like we discussed before, in the region editor, you can click this sleepy piano here, go to the region editor, and there is a transpose option. So you can see we've done it down one. You can click and drag and do that here, and click and drag up. Also, as always, you can double click in and just write in a number, and there you go. So that's 30. 31 would be using Alchemy as your first VST that you should get used to before you go out and spend on a VST. I still use Alchemy in my professional productions. So let's take a look without getting too deep, just some things that you can look into. Alchemy is my default software instrument. If I click in the middle, it opens up the synth, and there's a ton of sounds. There's 3,182 presets available for you to look through. There's too many to even remember. But also you can go to advanced and you can design your own sounds here. And if you click on one of these and you go to import audio, you can then get more sounds in here. There's so much you can do with the synth, and I don't want to design a synth sound right now, but I want to show you it is possible. And if you've heard things like Serum or this kind of thing, really, really solid synth. Serum and all paid VSTs are really good. But this will help you get your feet wet, I think, before you get into that, so it's not overwhelming when you buy your first virtual VST. If you already have VSTs and stuff, no worries. You can always still go back into Alchemy and supplement here. Coming back to browse, you don't even need to get into the advanced thing if you don't want. Come back to browse, look for a sound. Every sound you have has 8 different options, preset options within that sound. And then you can just dial some of these a little bit here without getting so advanced. Number 32 is adding other plugins, instruments, anything from previous Logic files that you have into this Logic file that you're working in. So for example, this song I'm working in, I know for a fact I produced a song a couple of weeks ago. I really like the bass sound. I didn't save it as a preset or anything. I just know it's in that Logic file, and I want to go and get that file. So one thing you could do is open up that Logic thing, bounce the audio, look at what you did on the inspector window, and then try to copy it. But don't do that because that's too long. Do this instead. Go up here to your file browser, go to this little icon, which is your Logic files, and then go to the Logic file that you know your file is in. So for me, I know I really liked a bass sound that I made, and I know it's in the Circles remake. So I'm going to click Circles Remake, and here are all the files that are in that session. So these names here would be like these names in here. So here's my bass, and then if I scroll to the right, I can choose what I want to bring in. Do I want to bring the content? I don't necessarily need the content, but I just want the actual instrument. I want the plugin. That's what I need. But for the case of this video, I'll bring in the content. I don't need the cells, I don't need the sends, I don't need the IO. I don't even know what this is. Can't see it. Automation, I don't need the automation, and I don't know what this is. Keep bus number, I don't need that stuff. I just need the plugins and I need the content. Okay, so let's add. Here it is, bass. This is the entire bass track from the other session, including what I actually programmed. So I can just shorten this up. I don't need that. I don't need the file browser anymore. Bring that in. Now I can open up the bass sound. I can see what I've programmed in. That's the exact bass that I had a preset in Trillion that I edited a bit, and I like it a lot. And now I can play it directly on my MIDI keyboard. And I'm ready to go with this song. I can, if I want to just remove that content, and I can play along right away with my drums. So in context, I'm doing this a lot with tracks I'm producing because I don't save everything that I've produced, right? Sounds I've made, If I like a vocal sound, if I'm producing an artist that I really liked a vocal sound, I can drag that in and sample that vocal. This is going to save you a lot of time while you're producing, because if you remember something you really liked, just import it in the file browser and you have it right away in your production session. Number 33, the beloved Option plus click move, which everyone needs to know, which is just, I'm just going to cut that. And that is just holding Option, pressing left click, and moving things over. It makes copies so fast. And you can do it like this. You can do 2 at a time, 4 at a time. So that again is just holding Option, left click, bring it over, letting go of click first, and then Option. If you hold Option, click, and let go of Option, that's not going to work. So you have to go hold Option, click, then let go of click first. You can do this also with entire sections of songs. So if I want all of these and I want to duplicate the chorus, before we talked about this, we could just go Command R, right? And that would duplicate it here. But if I want it over at bar 89, I can go highlight, Option, click, then drop it at 89. And now I have it there. I could also go Command R, Command R, Command R, Command R, then delete those, bring it over. You know, there's multiple ways to do things in Logic, but Option click is going to be your best friend for making copies of things. Option click actually has to, little side thing here on this one as well. You can do Option click on things in pretty much most things in Logic to reset things. So for example, this bass sound is set at -7.2. If I Option click, it's going to go back to 0. Option click, back to 0. Option click, back to 0. This goes for panning too. If I accidentally pan this bass off to the left, Option click, back to 0. This is just going to save you tons of time instead of just scrolling and, getting back up to 0. Just go Option click. It resets things. Option click, back to 0. Same thing for plugins. If you open up a compressor plugin and you've increased the ratio, Option click brings it back. You've increased the threshold, Option click brings it back. So think of Option click as like a reset thing and a copy making tool in the session view. What else does it go for? Oh yeah, right here on the sends. If you have sends to like a reverb, and let's say something like this, you can go Option click, and that's going to go full send up to 0. So this is really valuable. Like it's just so much faster than doing it like as you would scroll, where's 0? There's 0. Oh, went past it. Oh, went before it, went past it. Oh, past it. It's hard to get on 0 sometimes, but just go Option click 0, Option click 0. So Option click reset, but Option click also making copies in the session view here. Number 34 is making copies of plugins to other tracks very quickly. For example, in context, if I have 2 pianos and I'm editing a piano here and I have a tape delay on this piano, and let's say I want this tape delay to be on this piano below. So one way to copy that over, you could copy the channel strip, but this is going to copy all the plugins. You just want the tape delay. What I would recommend is open up X. This is your mixer. If you just press X, it's going to open up this window. And your mixer will open up by default with whatever track, like the highlighted track here will be the highlighted track on your mixer. So we have Yamaha Grand. Let's just say Yamaha Grand 1 and Yamaha Grand 2. So Yamaha Grand 1 is going to be highlighted here. Here we go. So we just want it over on Yamaha Grand 2, which is here. So all we have to do is hold Option and drag that over. And now, so it's the Option click. It's the same, it's the segue into the Option click tip before. It's just holding Option. You can kind of, as you can make copies of regions, you can also make copies of plugins. I can do this over here. I can do this over here. I'm copying all these plugins like this. And then you can just delete the ones you don't want. And I'll leave that one there. And then just press X. And you're now down. Number 35 happens to be, I think, one of my favorite tips of workflow productivity tips with making beats is saving drum patterns in the step sequencer. How we would do that? Well, let's open up a new step sequencer track, new software instrument track, and we're going to go over here, go to the Drum Machine Designer. Now we're going to X this window down. I'm going to X the library. Just going to zoom in, cycle to the top here, and solo this for a second. Press E and go to the step sequencer. So if you're not familiar with the step sequencer, it's okay. What I'm going to do now is load in a drum set so we can work with some sounds right now. So I'll have to open up my library again and just go to electronic drum kit. Let's open up an 808 for this case. Close the library, back here, opening up the step sequencer. There are many different types of patterns you can use with drums, but there are some standard drum patterns that you might like. Maybe it's a 4 on the floor kick, or you have a certain beat pattern that you like. Save these patterns so you can reuse them as starting points even for your next sessions. So for example, if we just have a kick, snare, maybe kick snare pattern like this. Now we can save this pattern. So we can call it our 4 on the floor snare pattern. And in order to do that, we will click this little window here, user patterns. See, I have a 4 on the floor pattern already, but I can go here and go save pattern. And I can call this 4 floor and snare, maybe. And now that's saved. So now we can, if we delete this entire drum track and we start from scratch, new software instrument, drum machine designer, and we load up another 808 flex, or even a different kit. An Atlanta kit doesn't have to be the same. We go to our step sequencer by pressing E, and we can go to, if that is closed, just open up this again, go to user, patterns, and we have 4 on the floor and snare. And there's our pattern using the same kick and snare options as it was, even though the kit was different. You can also use the template patterns that are available. So open up this again. If you don't see any other thing to the left, you got to go to the bottom here and scroll. This is kind of bad design, I think, but you go to templates here and you can see, patterns. There are also templates. Patterns is what I want to discuss. And you can go to drums and then you can choose any pattern. Like let's look at robot funk. This is a robot funk pattern, like a full-on pattern. Let's listen. Now this is using the Atlanta drum kit. So we can go over into our library and change to the 808 flex. Now we have the 808 flex sounds with this same robot funk pattern. Kind of don't like the robot funk. Let's try the modern analog. You know, this is what you get with some of these patterns, and they're not always that good, but sometimes you can get inspired. Let's see here. Lots of cowbell, right? Let's get rid of the cowbell. And maybe I don't like that huge open hat. You can see that there's different regions at the top here. We can also just start changing the steps if we just want it to be this. Have a look at different patterns that are available for free in Logic to boost your creativity and get inspired. Okay, let's get on to tip number 36. Let's remove that. And let's talk about recording reverse reverbs, actually, and how you would do reverse reverbs. We kind of made one down here earlier in this video with the electric guitar, and I deleted it already. That's okay, because we're going to start something from scratch. You've likely heard of this kind of reverse reverb stuff before, and you can do this on anything that has a transient. And what I mean by that is something kind of that looks like this, actually, like a triangle on its side that has something hard at the beginning that sustains and lasts through. So a great instrument that does that is a crash hit. And we're going to do it with a crash hit in this video as an example. So new software instrument, and I'm going to go open up a drum kit, any old drum kit right now, not worried about the sound. T, P to make a region, and T, T back to select, double click, and look for a crash hit. This is fine. So I got this crash hit here. I'll make it a bar in length, and I'll increase the velocity, right click, and bring that up. Solo that out. Just a crash hit, right? It sustains pretty long. So what we want to do is add some reverb. Go over to plugins and add a reverb. I'll do Space Designer, and I'll just look for a big preset. So yeah, large space. Let's do indoor spaces, sure. A big old church. So now we have a big old church reverb on this crash shit. Lots of reverb, great. What we want to do now is bounce this in place. We want to bounce this to audio so we can reverse this thing. So I can do Control B. Don't want to bypass the effects. And I do want to include the tail. That's very important. And I'll have normalize on. Press OK. Now we have it down here. Same exact sound, but it's going to be a lot louder because I've put normalize on. So I'll just quiet that a bit. We just click it, go over to our region editor. We've already discussed reverses. Just click reverse. The idea is you line up the reverse here that comes in right to your chorus or where you want it to come in. And I just right click to cut that. And I'm going to maybe have it start. Well, actually, I'm not sure. Probably bar right here, this beat. So I'm going to remove that. And then I'm going to Command, fade that in. So right now in solo, I'll just press S to solo this. Here's what it sounds like. So you've heard this kind of thing before, right? Adds great suspense coming into the chorus here. You can also bounce this in place again, so Control B, and then reverse this and have this come in like this. So it's kind of moving in, it's like crashing into one another. We can fade that out. You'd have to play with it to get the right kind of vibe going, you know. And that's what production is, playing with things. But the idea is that's how you would do a reverse reverb on things. Now let's move on to tip 37 though, which is you can actually make the same thing with just the reverb sound. And I wanted to do this as a new tip because I record reverb for different instruments to make pad sounds. So how do you record reverb from a different track? Let's focus on this guitar for a second. What I'm going to do, theoretically, is I'm going to put a lot of reverb on this track, and then I'm going to have another track here that's going to record just the reverb from this guitar. So I have this set up in my production template already, which is makes it really easy to do, and I'll walk you through how to do this. So I'm going to turn my plugins on the guitar, and I'm going to leave the reverb off. Just ignore that right now. Now I'm going to output this electric guitar here to a different bus output. This will be my bus effects, bus 18, pad effects. So now it's going here, my electric guitar, and it's coming to bus 18. And in bus 18, it has a super massive reverb and an EQ, which is doing nothing right now, but I could do something like this just to clean up the lows and the highs. So if I play this track now, it's going to be wild because there's going to be a lot of reverb. So have a listen. What I want to do now is set up a new track and record just the reverb. I don't really want the pluckiness of the guitar in there. So what I'll have to do is add an audio track and have the input of the audio track not to be my interface because I'm not recording it. I want the input to be bus 19 because that's what this track is here. It's going to bus 19. So we have the guitar coming in, going to bus 18, coming up here, into here, bus 18, and then out to bus 19. So it's just a bus ride. That's all it is. And then we have a new audio track. The bus has to come to make a stop into here. So we need to change this input to bus 19. Now the bus is coming in here, and it's going to go through these plugins, but we don't need any plugins here. And it's going to go to the stereo out. So once we record enable this track, it's going just to, don't want to freeze it. Once we record enable this track, Oh boy. Now we're just going to record in here the reverb. So let's do that. Let's record. So now we can call this reverb pad. If we solo the reverb pad, it will just be the reverb. Sorry, mute that. And then we can go back to our guitar here and we can change the output back to the stereo out because we want our regular guitar sound. So we have our regular guitar sound. But we have that reverb pad way behind it, but we have our normal guitar here. And then this reverb pad. You can just mix it in ever so slightly. And okay, so you can also extend this further. You can filter that. You can add your own effects on this reverb pad. Right now, this is all it is an audio track that sounds like a guitar with reverb on it. So I can EQ this like this. I can automate it like this, going up to like have it as a suspenseful thing. You know, that could be really cool to have automated going into a chorus. And we will touch on automation and how to do that. We'll leave that for another example. It's a future tip down the line, so not to be discussed right now. Number 38 is the slow down and speed up fades feature in Logic, which is a super underrated, cool production hack trick you can do. And let's do it on the electric guitar again. You know what it sounds like. So we would do it just like we would add any other fade. For me, my fade tool, like you know by now, is in my option tool there. And I add the fade. I'm going to edit a little bit. And if I right click there on the fade, I'll see fade in, speed up. So I'm talking about this speed up thing. If I click that, it's going to change color. And now it's going to sound like this. Super cool, right? And it's that easy. And at the end, we can do a fade down. So if I just move this over for a second and fade this down, right click, slow down, it's going to sound like this. And then, and we don't have to have it that much if we don't want to. We can curve it out, maybe like this. You can get creative. It's more of a production thing in my mind. So that's speed up and speed down with fades. In context, I do this sometimes as a quick intro for things if you need it, or before a drop. Sometimes you can drop everything down and then lift it up back in the chorus. Number 39 is saving your own audio loops, the things you've made as Apple loops. So the loops that you can create loops that could be available for here, only for you. That are locally on your computer. Let's say you really like this loop. It's an 8-bar loop. And you want that for future use available in Apple Loops. You right click, you go to export, add to loop library. And then here you say, you name it. Cool guitar loop. You can have it as a loop or a one shot. One shots, typically this would be a loop, because you'd want to loop it. But a one shot, you might be like, you've designed a snare sound you like, or a kick sound, or one thing that it happens at one thing. That's what a one shot is. Provide some metadata so you can find it later on. Click create. Once you do that, it will be available in here under the metadata that you've saved it in. And you can go and click and drag it in and use it in any of your further projects. Number 40, using latch automation. So we kind of touched a bit on automation when we were working on this reverb pad a few tips ago. So let's get back into that, and we will automate the filter going up, and we can talk about why you should use latch automation for productivity when you're producing. Quickly, how you might want to automate that is go into automation by pressing A, adding the plugin you want, right? Like the filter, going to the filter, finding out where the high cut frequency is, or for example, if you want to do a logic EQ, going to a high cut frequency, drawing it in, and that's how you could do it. This is fine. However, I'm just going to do that. What's faster way is you don't even have to go into automation. You don't even have to press A ever. What you can do is with latch automation, it's always available in this area here. Just so you know, if I open up A again, you see the read, drop down, read, touch, latch, right? This is also available here, read, touch, latch, right. And it's available there because we don't have to go into A. We don't have to go into this window. We can just go over here, press latch. Now what this means, when I press spacebar and this track starts playing, whatever I do to this track, it's going to be automated. So let's do a small volume automation and then a filter automation. So I'm going to press spacebar and then I'm going to increase this fader up over time. Okay, now let me press A just so you can see that, but we don't have to because we know it's in there. Here it is, volume. We just program that in. Then if you want to go in and edit it more, you can zoom in and we can go, hey, okay, I want to make that nice and clean. I can go like this and then that's fine. You don't have to do that though. So let's do the filter automation because we still have latch. We can still open up a plugin and then we can now automate this filter to open up. Now that's in there. X, go back to read. It's super important that we go back to read because if we don't and we touch anything while the song is playing, it's going to program that in. So then we don't even have to go into A because we know that's in there. We can just take a listen back and we know that's programmed in there. So that's the benefit of using latch automation. Just go over to the right, press latch, program the thing you want in, and then you can quickly get those ideas out. Tip number 41, which has to do with automation as well, is you can use quick access automation. So if you have a controller with knobs on it where you want to use the knobs to control the automation, like when I was doing this filter, if you would rather not do it with your mouse, which I'm doing, but a knob so you can be a bit more tactile, a bit more surgical, you need to go to the settings, which is Logic Preferences, Automation. And down here where it says Automation Quick Access, put that on and then assign a knob. So if you have a knob here, I don't, because I'm comfortable using the mouse, but if you'd rather, start slowly turn the control up and down you want to assign. And then Logic will know, and then you press done. And that's it. Then you can go back to the automation and do it with the knob. Easy as that. Number 42, still on automation, is if you prefer later on when you're producing and getting more narrowed in on the automation and you're doing it within the automation window. So for example, in A, typically you would have to click in, right? And then create dots. And then from there you would, create more dots and make sure you're not affecting everything on the left and the right of that. An easier way to do that, let's just go back here, is with your marquee tool. So this is when I might switch to marquee tool. And then I'll draw a square on this region. Let me just zoom in here. And then click in. And you'll see it's created 2 dots for me. So I can go right away and just go up. And it has those 2 dots down. So it's not affecting anything to the left, to the right. And then you can just affect that region. Then you can go in with this one. And you can go down. So that's also a super fast way, use the marquee tool to your advantage if you'd rather program it in with your mouse and using dots like this. Number 43, which also is on automation, is if you're unsure what parameters to choose inside automation. So for example, let's just take a look here. If I'm in A and I want to automate a low cut frequency or a high cut frequency with the channel EQ, for example, and I don't know where to choose that in the channel EQ because you have to go down here and choose what you want to automate, right? What's easier, in my opinion, is just go up to mix. You have to turn something on. This is probably selected off for you because it's default selected off. It's auto select automation parameter in read mode. If you click that on, and then you can click on anything here like this, now it's available in the automation. It knows it's just connecting those two together. So if you go over here and scroll down, like you want this to do a high cut frequency, just click that, go back to your automation, then click in. Now you have a high cut frequency and you can program that in with dots, or like we said, go with your marquee, make a square, click in, and then you have the thing and you can program it in. That's a easier way instead of having to go search through all the parameters of the plugins, because that can be really cumbersome as well if you're using paid plugins, like if we're using, let's say a paid reverb, for example, like a vintage reverb. And Logic still will calculate that. So we can go here, just mix, Valhalla mix. Great. Go here, click in. Now I got my Valhalla mix. I don't have to go through the Valhalla verb here and go, even though it's not that actually complicated here, sometimes it can be. So when in doubt, go out to mix, turn on auto select automation parameter in read mode, and then you're off to the races with automation. Number 44, let's talk about side chaining. And side chaining your kick specifically. We'll also discuss a little bit on how to side chain your reverb theoretically. What does side chain mean? When your bass is playing, because they share the same low end frequency, the bass is going to be ducked a little bit when the kick happens to leave more space for the kick. And you can determine how much it's going to duck, which means reduce the sound of the bass. And sidechain is a production tool you can use on any instrument, on a synth, on a vocal, on anything. It's more of a production thing in my mind than a mixing thing because it gives a pumping effect. There's a rhythm effect that comes with sidechain. And you can also determine the rhythm of it based on what we're going to go through right now. How I like to do sidechaining is I set up a track called the ghost track. And this ghost track is going to be our rhythm. And it doesn't really matter what the sound is, but in our purposes, we'll make it a kick and we'll call it a ghost kick. So track, new software instrument track, and we'll just go to a drum kit, any drum kit, and we will just make a region here, a long region for the entirety of the song. Bring it up here. Call it a ghost kick. And this is important. I'm going to change the ghost kick output to no output. So there's no sound. That's why we call it a ghost kick. And then I'm going to just go to the kick here. Okay, so I can just make a pattern here. And so what I'm doing is option, right now I'm doing option hold click to make those patterns. I can also do this and do Command R. So this would be a bar pattern, not much pumping going on. If you want to do like a 4 on the floor pattern, we just move those over to bar 1 here. A 4 on the floor pattern would be more something like this. We just Command R, Command R, Command R. And then we can Command R all of that. Multiple ways to do this to make different copies of things. Command R is pretty easy though. And then we can go over like that again, Command R. So that's basically the entirety of the track. So now we have a 4 on the floor kick that's going to give a pumping effect on any bass. And I will add a bass just to show you what that actually sounds like. So let me just add any bass here. A subby bass will do. And I'll just play some notes in here. 2, 3, 4. let's just use that as an example. We will actually probably good to do this to go over some of the lessons that we've already done. I'll Command A, Shift Option, make them all the same size, and I'll quantize that by a whole note and remake them. Actually, do Command A, and I'm going to make them Shift Option and all the same velocity. So right click and about 120. And another shortcut, I will go Shift Option down to move it down a whole octave because I programmed it in too high. Okay, so we have our bass. Now, how do we make this sidechain pumping effect with this ghost kick? We need to add a compressor to the bass. There is already a compressor, so we could just go and add it here. And now I will go to sidechain. You'll see this on every Logic plugin. And I can go, or every Logic compressor, sorry. And I can go to instrument, because our ghost kick is an instrument. That's what we're looking for right now. Down here, ghost kick. So what's going to happen now is there's going to be a pumping effect of a 4 on the floor kick with our bass. And you're going to hear that when I play the bass now. You can hear that, right? There's a lot of clicking going on because I'm really compressing it, but you hear it for the sake of hearing it. This is without the compression. Sorry, this is without the compression. This is with the sidechain. Now, we can choose any other rhythm we want here in the ghost kick. At the beginning here, we can have a rhythm like this if we want. It doesn't necessarily need to be 4 on the floor. From a production perspective, you can get quite creative with these rhythms. And you can go something like this. It can be anything. You get the idea. Now, it will sound different when we play this bass. That's how you would sidechain something. Choose a rhythm with your ghost kick instrument. And this isn't important what the instrument is. It's more the pattern of the MIDI. And then go to the instrument you want to have the movement, add that compressor, and link it up in the compressor. So link it up here in the drop down. Go find the instrument there. And then it will provide that rhythm. When you're in the compressor, something I didn't mention is the more threshold you go down here, the more pumping effect you're going to get. Now, theoretically, we can also do this to a vocal and its own reverb. You can sidechain the reverb to the vocal signal. So that would mean whenever the vocal is playing, the reverb is being brought down in volume. It's being ducked. And whenever the vocal is not singing, the reverb shines out. So that can be really cool because in lead vocals, sometimes when the person is singing, you want it to be up and close, right? And you want to hear the vocal and you want it to be up front in the mix. But when they stop singing, you might want that reverb to fill that empty space. And you would do it very similar to how we just did the instruments. But you basically would go to your reverb, wherever your reverb bus is, and you would need to compress your reverb with your lead vocal. So I will do maybe another video on that without getting extending this video too much. Tip number 45 is turning audio files into MIDI files. Yes, this is possible if you get an audio file that you really like the melody, but you don't know what it is and you want to recreate it in MIDI, or you want it to edit it a little bit. You can choose any audio file. Let's do it with our electric guitar down here. And with our guitar, we can solo it out. We have an audio, right? We can open up our editor by pressing E, and we already have flex pitch on, but we want to go to this DNA symbol, go flex, and go flex pitch. Yeah, this is fine. We can reapply this. All of these little blue things are MIDI notes. So that's what we want. So we just have to highlight them all. Actually, I don't even think you need to highlight them all. Since we have the region highlighted, we can go edit down to create MIDI track from flex pitch data. Click that, and then it will put a new track software instrument below with your default software instrument. So mine's Alchemy, and we have this MIDI data. So it is right. It's playing the right notes. The sound is wrong. So we might want to go in and change that sound, or at least you know what the pattern is like, and you can go and edit it and do as you please with the new MIDI data that you've taken from an audio file. Tip number 45, and now we're in a new category as well. We're talking about workflow productivity. This first one is semicolon. It's a shortcut that moves region to the playhead. And I'm using this a lot. For example, if I know, and you can do this for regions and multiple regions. So let's just unsolo everything. If I know I want this bass, for example, this bass region to come over to the beginning of the verse, I just have to press semicolon and it will snap there. I can also do that with multiple regions, like I was saying, if I want this little Yamaha Grand, these two regions here, semicolon, and it all jumps over. Number 46 is how to manage zooming, going in and out very quickly. And you've probably noticed me doing this throughout the tutorial, and how am I doing this and what is my personal workflow. So for me, I'm more of a mouse user. So what I do is, if you hold Option and scroll up and down on your mouse, you will make the tracks fatter. If you scroll in, you will make the tracks skinnier. So I'm going up and down like this. And then if you also hold Option and scroll left or right, then you will make the tracks wider and then thinner. But you can really only do that if you're using a trackpad, right? And I have a mouse, so I can't really scroll left with my mouse. So what I do, and what my workaround is for that, is I have a trackpad I use a mouse in my right hand and a trackpad in my left hand. So I pinch zoom with my left hand to make the tracks thinner and fatter, or wider, sorry. And then I scroll up and down with my mouse to do that. So if I'm like wanting to get in on this area quickly, I'll go Option, scroll down, and then trackpad, scroll wide, trackpad up. Now I'm here. So essentially what I'm doing here is just moving. These are the shortcuts to what these things are. This is fatter and this is wider. If you're also more comfortable on the keyboard with this kind of things, you can do Option, up and down, and left and right. So if you're on the keyboard with your two hands, pressing down, pressing up while I'm holding, Command, I've said, did I say Option? You hold Command up and down, and Command left and right. You can zoom in quickly. Number 47 is duplicating tracks. I pretty much, in context, only duplicate tracks. I'm rarely ever going up here and adding new tracks under the track menu. Because if I know I want a new software instrument, then I just go to a software instrument of what I have, and I Command D. So I just Command D on this bass, and then I might go in here and change, like, I wanted a synthesizer, or I wanted a paid instrument down here. If I wanted an audio track, I can go down here. This is an audio track. I can press Command D. Now, when you do this, you're making a duplicate of the track, right? So this is a bad example because I just made a duplicate track of our reverb recording where we have a different input. So I might get confused if I go and start recording this track as a vocal or something, and I realize the input is bus 19. I need to have that as input 1 or something. Not that big of a deal, but that's what Command D is. You can press it multiple times to get multiple instances of the instrument. And you can also go highlight them all and go Command backspace to delete multiple tracks. But an in-context example of how I might use this would be, okay, so I have this piano part, and what I would do if I want a lower synth, and we kind of went through this example, I'd do Command D to drop a new software instrument. I would change to like a pad sound. So I just go here and search pad. And let's just, for the purpose, use anything. Then I would copy Option click, hold the region down, and then Shift Option down to bring it down 12 semitones. These are all the tips before this, if you haven't watched it up until this point in the video. And now we can use this, we can lower that. Obviously really wrong pad sound, but maybe something. Number 48 is using the period and comma keys to jump left and right in your session. If you are maybe up and close doing some recording, whenever you press period, you will go to the right. Whenever you press comma, you will go to the left. And this happens to do with bars. It's not based on your nudge value, like when we were talking about nudging. If I go right click and change my nudge value to tick, and I go period, it's not going to move over a tick. This does happen just to be with bars. So it can be quick. For example, if I'm here, I go to my mouse, click here. It might just be quicker to just go comma and click play, right? So many different sounds going on in this song right now. Will be quite a cleanup job later. 49 is how to quickly copy channel strip settings from other tracks to other tracks. We talked about copying plugins from track to track. This would be copying all the plugins from a track. So we have this electric guitar track here. We've processed it, right? If we go and add a new track because we want to add a new guitar, and we call this electric guitar 2, we have no plugins, right? We want to copy all these plugins. The way to do that is Option Command C. So I can go here, press Option Command C, go down arrow, and then Option Command V. And now on this track, I have all the same plugins because I want the same tone on this guitar. I'm also doing this a lot with vocals. If I add a new harmony and I want the same tone of the harmony and the same processing as harmonies before, I would do it like this as well. So very, very similar to how you would copy and paste anything, Command C, Command V. This is just adding options. So Option Command C, Option Command V. Now, if you're asking yourself, does it make sense to have two tracks with the exact same plugins? Sometimes it's not that big of a deal. But if I went to add, let's say, 3 new audio tracks, and I copy these plugins, Option Command C, Option Command V, Option Command V, Option Command V. You can see even the volume is going over. It's all the track settings. This is where it starts maybe not to make as much sense because every track now is the exact same plugins. You'll likely want to have an aux track, a bus output where one track has all the plugins, and then you send the audio to that one track. And we'll get into bus outputs later on, so not to worry about that right now, just to have that on your radar. I can delete those and get to tip number 50, tip shortcut trick number 50, which is Command U. And basically, Command U is, I'm using the cycle all the time. That's how I pretty much stop and play my tracks. If you go to a region and press Command U, the locator up here, the cycle locator, will go to that region. If I go to this Command U, contextually, I would do this if I know I want to go over to this section. And I know I want to loop it and work on that section a bit instead of dragging my cursor over, playing it, or going over here and cycling at the top and making sure I'm all lined up. It's easy just to go click the region of where you want to loop and then Command U, and then you're cycled at the top. Tip number 51 is pressing Shift and moving the playhead. So what I mean by this, the playhead's here. If you press Shift, hold Shift, sorry, and click on any gray area, so what I mean in this gray session area, the playhead's gonna jump to that. So I'm just holding Shift. And so if I'm working in context, if I'm working on this chorus here with this bass line, and I want to hear it right before the chorus, I might have the playhead here. But instead of clicking and dragging the playhead over, or instead of cycling at the top and pressing spacebar, I can just go hold Shift and click there, and then press play on my spacebar. Same thing if I want to jump to the next chorus, just hold Shift, click here, and now I can press play again. I can also hold Shift and double click, and then it will automatically play. Shift, double click, automatically played. Number 52 is inverted cycle range. So as we know from the top here, we can cycle anything by clicking and holding and making this yellow bar, and that's going to loop that section. It's called cycle. What inverted cycle range means, so if I'm working on this pre-chorus here, and I'm not sure about the pre-chorus yet, I might want to skip it. I might want to hear what the verse is like going right into the chorus. So how I'm going to do this is I'll make a cycle range where the pre-chorus is, then I'm going to hold Command and click on the yellow. Then it's going to just turn it into a yellow box here. So now when I play through the verse, it's going to automatically jump right to the chorus. And that's great. That gives me the idea of what the song could sound like in context without certain sections. Number 53 would be saving presets in plugins. So every plugin in Logic or paid plugins have saved presets. Let's say we are a guitarist and we use a lot of, we record a lot of guitars, let's say, and we have an EQ that we like. Maybe it looks something like this. And we know we really like this template as a starting point for us to EQ our guitars. So we can just save this little shape here, save this preset. We'll go at the top, save as, and then we will say electric guitar. That's electric guitar, that's good. Save, and then when I go to add a new audio track and I record another guitar, and when I go here to EQ the guitar, I can just go up here, electric guitar, and now I can start with that shape. And then I might go and edit it, or I might not have to, but this is going to save you time. Same thing goes for every plugin. EQs, compressors. If you have a compression that you really like, it's the same thing. And you really like this compression, you can save it, and this will always save it in a certain file. It will always open up in the Finder window of the file that it should be saved in. So don't go and change the folder here, because this is important, because it's going to be in the folder structure that's on the that will show up in here. So it's important when you go save as, don't go and save it to your desktop or something, because you won't be able to find it later in the plugin. Well, I have a preset that I use in Alchemy as an 808 preset. So I'll open up Alchemy and go drop down here. You can see I have 808 bass. This is just an 808 sound that I made in Alchemy, and then I saved it as a preset in Alchemy. So you can do that as well with instruments. If you have a piano sound that you designed, save it as a preset. You can also save it as an instrument. So we'll get into channel presets and that kind of thing a bit later, but you can save things. Right now we're just talking about presets in plugins with that are right in here, and then this list will grow if you save more presets. Let's move on to 54, which is channel strip settings and saving channel strip settings. This kind of like plugins, saving things that you've done in the past to help you be more productive. I do this a lot. So presets are channel strip settings, are on this side. This is your channel strip, basically this vertical line here. And if you have an audio track, for example, and this is your vocal track. So over time you have a lead vocal and you start adding auto-tune, and you start adding reverb. And you add more compression. And maybe you're adding a de-esser. You can see the list is getting long, right? So how do you save this channel strip settings of plugins? You go at the top here and go save channel strip setting as, and I'll just do this to show you. I'll go, I already have a lead vox. You can see it's grayed out here, but I'm gonna just do a lead vox 2, and I can delete this later. And I'll show you how to delete them and where to find them. Lead vox 2, save. Now I can, when I'm in my new session, for example, let's say we're in the future and I run a vocal track, I can go to over here, setting, and down here are all my presets. So there's my lead vox 2, just click it, and now I have all those plugins. And the beauty of this is when you save channel strip settings, if you have made edits in the plugins, those will carry over as well in the channel strip settings. So in this new vocal here, you're gonna have all these plugins, but also what you did within those plugins. But there is a difference in saving presets with audio tracks, MIDI tracks, and drum tracks. These are the three fundamental tracks within Logic. So an audio track here, it's blue. You'll notice when we go save channel strip setting, it's under the track folder. This is important. If we just cancel that and we save a channel strip setting with a MIDI instrument, it's under the instrument folder. So that's important to just distinguish the differences. Not all channel strip settings are in the same folder. And we'll get into folder hierarchy later on and where you can find those actually in your computer to make changes if you mess things up or you want to clean things up. Tip number 55, let's continue on presets, channel strip settings, but I want to talk about patches, performance patches, and why you might want to save a performance patch versus a channel strip setting. Go over the side and hover here. You see how there's a little arrow coming up? This is the presets for this specific plugin. So this arrow here is the channel EQ. This arrow here is the presets for the plugin. If you click on that arrow, it's going to open up the library, and you can see here's our electric guitar preset that we made previously. So you can just get to it from here. You don't even have to open up the plugin. That's going to save you even more time. Or the compressor, we can see we don't have any presets for the compressor, although these are Logic stored presets. So we can just go in there and choose a Logic preset. Same thing for any of the other plugins here. Also, the same thing goes for any MIDI. So let's go to our Yamaha Grand. When we click that, you're going to get all the preset instruments that are available within the sampler. So this is presets of plugins. This arrow is presets of the instruments within this instrument plugin. So that's how to differentiate that, and that's going to help us explain the next thing, where if you want to save a channel strip setting, you would be saving the instrument plugin and the plugins itself, right? So for example, if we add a piano track, let's bring it up here, and we choose, actually we want to choose maybe a vintage electric piano, and we do some things on it. We compress it again. You know, we add some reverb, and maybe we add some delay, okay? And we really like this electric piano. Now we can save this in two ways. We can save it, if we click here, we can save it as a channel strip, or we can save it as a performance. So let's save as performance, and we'll go modern classic tutorial, just so I can reference that later. Program number, okay. So okay, now we've saved it as a performance, and you can see in the library here, this is where we can see the hierarchy of the folder structure. It's always important to look what parent folder you are down here as well. You're in user channel strip settings. So performance, we have 0 modern classic tutorial. Okay, so if we add a new software instrument, and we go to user channel strip settings, performance, there's our modern classic tutorial, double click, and then we have it here. So why would you ever save a performance versus a channel strip setting? To be honest, I don't really know the difference. It could be more detailed to routing. I think when you have bigger projects you want to save maybe a routing, like if you want this piano to be bussed somewhere else. For now, I would just honestly stick to channel preset settings. I just wanted to give you the option of what this actually is. Essentially, it does the same thing as a channel strip setting. So we could just go here, save channel strip setting as, and you'll know it's in the instrument, not in the performance folder. So it's technically has the same parent folder, but this is one down. So you can see there's our modern classic here. We can go back up a level, and that's where we have our performance. So we can just save it as a channel strip setting. Now let's go back up a level here, user channel strip settings. We can click on that, and we can see all the options of folders we have. There's something called user patches here. In terms of how I differentiate user patches and channel strip settings, I use my user patches for instruments that I like. So like if I design a retro 60s bass here, or if I have a drum sound I like, I use the patches for that. And then I use my user channel strip settings for like my lead vocal settings, all the plugins. And that's how in my mind I differentiate it. I'm not sure if that's actually the right way to do it, but it's just clean in my head to have patches be like instrument and performances, user channel strip settings as like all the plugins and stuff and what you want. You can also load up a patch and then load up a channel strip setting. So let's do that right now. For example, let's add a track. Let's say I'm starting from scratch, right? And I want to make some drums. So I want these to be drums. So I'm going to load up a patch, which is let's load up the 80s kit. So this is a patch that I've saved, and it has all these drums in it. Kick, snare, snare punch, clap, shaker, hat loop, and big clap. And then you can go into each of these tracks here and then load in a channel strip setting that you want to load in on this track. So if this was a vocal, we could load in the vocal channel strip setting. So that's how I differentiate patches and channel strip settings. Whenever you want to save anything, it's always on the left side. go to the folder you want to save it under. So if you do want to save it under a patch, and then just the bottom right here, it's save. Or you want to save these channel strip settings, go channel strip setting and save. And it's always on the left side here. Number 56, this is a quick and easy one. It has to do with holding shift again. Shift is like a magic button, and it does a lot of things in Logic. So sometimes in context, I find myself working on a vocal, and I might have eventually like all these plugins open, and it's getting a bit crazy because it's filling up the window, right? So instead of just Xing all these down one at a time, you can actually just hold shift on any one and press X, and they'll all go away. Even if two are open, it saves you time Xing and Xing. By clicking both, just hold shift, and now both of them are going down. Number 57, let's talk about bouncing tracks again. We briefly touched on this when we talked about slow computer problems at the beginning. This is the same thing as committing in Pro Tools. It's great for your computer, but it also mentally helps you commit to things. For example, if we're working on this bass line, and we like this bass line, we're committing to it, bounce it in place, because this is going to save your computer, but also mentally, you're just going to move on from that sound, and you're going to be able to create a flow while you're producing. So the shortcut for that, go down here, bounce, track in place, and you can see it's Control Command B. So we can go up here, Control Command B, and you can add it to a new track if we want, but let's replace the track. And we don't want to bypass, and let's include that if we want. Normalize will be on, and we'll press OK. Now this is going to bounce in place, and that's going to mentally help us commit to keep moving on. Now, one other way you can do that, if you don't want to do that, just Command Z. I'll go Control Command B. I'll put this on a new track and bounce this out. And then we could freeze the other one and hide it. That's one option we could do. So we could then have this track, which has the plugins, this track, which is just the audio. I'll go up here, I'll freeze it, I'll press spacebar, and then I will mute it. And then I'll press H. Pressing H is going to open up this button, and it's going to hide that track. Once I press H again, this track is going to disappear. So now that's in the back end, it's frozen. I don't have to worry about it. It's not going to slow the computer down. But if I was like, oh my gosh, at the end of the production, I want to make a change in the sound, I can't do that in the audio right now, but I can press H, bring this back up, unfreeze it, go to the sampler, make the change, and then recommit the sound. That's another thing you can do if you want to. Okay, cool little trick though on top of this is if you want to bounce, not in place, but bounce out to just share something, you can always just go, let's just delete this audio. And let's just unmute this for now. We can open up a Finder window here, or let's say you have hot corners on your desktop and your mouse goes to the right or the right corner or the left corner, whatever, and your desktop comes up. You can just take the region and drag it into your desktop. And now that is literally bouncing into my desktop right now in my Finder window. And it should be right here. There it is, subby bass, subby bass. You can do that with any track, and it's bounced as a WAV file. Number 58 is a quick way to get the zoom tool up. If you're working with audio a lot and you need to zoom in quickly, you can do that very quickly. So let's go back up to our guitar here. Now we've talked about the pressing Z, and that will really pop it up, and you can press Z to get back down. But whenever you press Control Option, that's going to get your zoom tool up. So just like it is, like if you went down here and chose the zoom tool on your left click, you can always have that option to go Control Option. And you can always have the option when you go Control Option. And then you can just make a little square around what you want to zoom in. So if it's this area, you can just make a square here, and that's going to zoom in on that area. You can make another square again, and we'll zoom in. You can zoom in as far as you want. And whenever you want to get out of that, you can just press Z again. I personally, in context, don't use the zoom tool very much. Hardly ever. Maybe at the end when I'm doing some editing with fades and things and I need to zoom in quickly. But I'm just getting so used to now zooming on my left, like using the trackpad on my left hand, the mouse in my right hand, that I'll just scroll in like this and go in pretty quickly. Like, because the pinching on the trackpad works so well, I'll just scroll out and now scroll back up. Just wanted to give you as an option, control option, you have your zoom tool. If you like the zoom tool, that's the quick way to do it. You don't need to have it in your toolbars. It can become really quickly in your left hand here. Number 59 is using the pay-per-click link inside the plugins. If you've ever opened up a plugin, let's just work with an audio track for now. New audio track, and you have a vocal, and let's say you open up a plugin. What is this plugin, right? What is this purple thing? If you don't know what that is and you've always seen it before, and sometimes it's purple and sometimes it's not, basically what this does is it links the plugins together on separate tracks. So if I have this on, I'm just going to create another audio track here, Command D, and actually create 4 audio tracks. And I'm going to have a pitch correction, because this sometimes happens to me in context. This is an in context example. I'll have, when I'm doing harmonies, and I'm going to just copy the channel strips over again. So before that, in an earlier tip, that was Option Command C. And I'm going to go Option Command V to paste these channel strip settings on these vocals. So now all these 4 vocal tracks are the same. You can see in the left window here. Okay, so now that because they're the same and the plugins are in the same order, when I open up a pitch correction plugin, and I'll just actually, I'm going to need to have to rename these 1 so you can identify the difference in the plugins. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so let's open up vocal 1 in the pitch correction. You can see vocal 1, and I'm going to click this pay-per-click link button on. When I just click on the vocal track 2, it automatically changes to the plugin in the same position. So this is, and because I have the pitch correction at the top, it's this vocal 2 now. I can go down, and now the plugin is vocal 3. If you don't have these links on, and I click vocal 2, this plugin is still vocal 1. So I can't go and, if I change this, it's actually changing vocal 1 track, not vocal 2. So this can be really handy if you need to change something that is in every plugin very quickly. Because if you don't have this on, you go, okay, if we have to change the key of vocal 1, we have to go to major scale C sharp. If we want to change everything to C, we'll have to go C, close the plugin down, go here, open the plugin up, go to C, close it down, open it up. You get the idea. With pay-per-click link, I can just click on it, go to the next one, C, go to the next one, C, and go to the next one, C. And you see how much faster that is. And it's in reference to the first plugin. So if this was a compressor at the top, now if I open up the pitch correction and link and click on vocal 2, it will open up the compressor. So that doesn't make sense in our use case, but it does make sense if, this is way too big. It does make sense, I'll probably do 75, sorry. It does make sense if the plugins are in the same order. Number 60 is another handy shift shortcut that you can do, and this happens to do in the inspector window, and holding shift and clicking on the bus outputs will give you where that's going in the right side. So let's say I'm working on the reverb pad and I want to know where this bus 7's going. I want to know where bus 2 is going, bus 11, and the stereo out. So if you click on it, bus 7, it's going to open up this window where you can change things. If you just hold shift and click, it's going to change where it's going to, and it's going to show up right here. So if I do shift click 11, it will change this to bus 11. Same thing with basically everything. If you hold shift, just like I was saying before, very valuable tool, hold shift and the stereo out, then you'll get your master track here. Because if I don't have the stereo out here and I want to change something on the master track, or let's say I am putting a master chain on this, instead of opening up X, scrolling to the right and going to my master track here, I will just close down X, click, hold shift click stereo out, and now I have it here. So then I can go and make my changes to the master track. Number 63, and moving on to a different section, organization and mixing. This first one is using markers and colors to organize your track. So throughout the video, you've noticed I do have markers. So let's delete those and we'll make some new ones. Markers are very valuable because it's just going to help you visually keep organized, but then I'll show you some other tips on how they can work as well. So whenever you want to add a marker, you can go to this drop down here, marker, and you can press the plus button. You can also do Option apostrophe, and that's just going to create a marker where your playhead is. So what I would do is when I'm making the song and I have a demo, I'll listen through Option apostrophe, pre-chorus, and you can see we're starting to build them up here. I think this is the chorus, I think. No, it's not. So I'll delete that one. And then Option apostrophe here for the chorus. I forgot it. We've done so many changes. I pitched that bass down earlier in the tutorial, so things are sounding a bit weird, but that's okay. So this is the chorus. So you get what I mean. I would go through the rest of the song, pre, verse, intro. Now that I have the main sections, I can copy these. So I can go Command C, bring this over to, sorry, I want to bring the verse over, and then I'll call this verse 2, pre over, pre 2 maybe, chorus over. Now they're all the same color. Let's just go Option C. Option C will always bring up the color box. And then you can just, let's click the verses, make them blue. Let's click the pre's, make them a darker blue. And let's click the choruses, make them a pink. And let's make the bridge and the intro an orange. So now we have a more clear view of what's happening in our song. We can snap this up and they'll still be at the top. If we want to play a section quickly, we just have to hold Option and click on the marker. So I'm holding Option in my left hand now, and I just click in the middle of chorus, and that's going to snap the playhead to the beginning of the chorus. Use colors, keep organized. It's going to save you in the long run. Let's move on to 64, I believe. Yes, 64, which is adding icons to keep organized. You'll notice here on my side, I've added lots of different icons. I like to add icons. That's a subjective thing. If you don't add icons, well, everything is going to look probably just like this. And it can be, from a bird's eye view, maybe a little too the same after a while, because all the audio tracks will be like this. You might have some MIDI tracks that might look differently, or you might have a bus track that looks like this, and then you might have some software instruments that look like this. So it's fine. You don't need to do it subjectively. I like to add what I'm actually playing. So this is a bass, so I will add a bass. This is a kick drum, so I will go to drums and I will add a kick drum. This is another bass, so you get the idea. It's a completely subjective thing. A lot of other DAWs don't even have this. You can also take this away if you don't want it. If you don't want the pictures at all and you're more used to Pro Tools where there's not that kind of thing, right click, go to Track Header Components, and then go to, where is it here? Track Icons. And you can take that away. Sometimes that's cleaner if you don't want that. I'm personally a fan of track icons. Number 65 is grouping tracks together with groups or summing stacks. And this is really, really valuable, and this is going to help you in the long run with your computer processing and productivity. So let us take an example here. Let's say 4 different audio or 5 different audio tracks. And let's say we have harmonies. I have harmony, harmony 1, harmony 2, you get the idea, harmony 3, harmony 4, and harmony 5. So the purpose of grouping these tracks together would be 1, organization. It's just going to snap these up in a folder and it's going to keep your session view organized. But 2, it's also really good for processing. And this is where we're talking about aux outputs and busing. So if I go Shift Command D, this is the shortcut to creating a group. You can create a folder stack or a summing stack. I'll show you what a folder stack is first. A folder stack, just a folder. There's nothing you can do on this track it's created for you, sweeps and transitions. Let's say it's our harmony folder. It's simply organization. If we go down, we can see the tracks we have in here, and nothing's changed within the tracks. And this new track that's created, this folder track, we can't do anything on it except move the volume up and down, which is also handy because whenever we move the volume down, it's going to relatively change the volume of this whole sound, right? So if you mix these 5 harmonies together in context like that, you're like, this is a good mix. I like these harmonies. Then you can move that entire group up and down. And that's going to help you mixing when you get to mixing. Let's Command Z that a bunch of times and go now over what a summing stack is. Summing stack will look the same. So I'll do Shift Command D and go to a summing stack. And it's going to be the same thing. But look, well, not really actually, not look the same. It's a bit different. So I'll say harmony stack. We have our 5 harmonies here. And now on this stack, you can see it's a little yellow icon. And we have an option to actually add more stuff here, more plugins, and also change the volume. So with that, that means whenever plugins we add here, if we add an EQ and a compressor, that's going to EQ and compress every single track within here, which is super handy because if you're going to have a plugin that's the exact same on every track here, well, don't have that. Just put it on this one track because you know this harmony 1 is going to this. This harmony 2 is going to this. They're all being fed to this output. And you can see that in action by going to harmony 1. The audio is up here. It's coming down, hits the plugins, and look, it goes to this thing called bus 26. What is bus 26? It's this harmony stack. Click on this harmony stack. Then you can see the input is bus 26. That's the routing of things. And we didn't have to do any of that routing, right? All we had to do was press Shift Command D and Logic has created all that routing for us. So you can see you have bus 26 for 1, bus 26 for 2, bus 26 for 3, and bus 26 for 4. We didn't have to do any of that. And for 5, if we go Command Z and just flatten the stack for a second, you can see harmony 1 now is going to the stereo out, like it should. When we add an audio track, everything goes to the stereo out. And as soon as we do Shift Command D, then it changes the routing. Now everything here goes to bus 26. So in this harmony 1, if I know this EQ, if I know I want to add a low cut, and I do the same thing on every harmony, right? And look, because we had the paper click on, we can just go down a track and it's going to open up that plugin because this plugin is in the same sequence. And I can go and have the same plugin, the same EQ on every track here. That's a bit of a waste of time because since these tracks are going to this track, it just makes sense to put the plugin on this track instead. So we can go to the EQ and just do the low cut here. And then it's fine. Of course, you can go in and do more. You can have a low cut and then maybe on this track you want to do something else. It's totally fine to have plugins on these tracks. But the fundamental to understand with busing tracks is if they're in a group like this in a summing stack and they're being routed to this main track and that main other track, don't duplicate plugins because that's going to just not be great for your processing speed. It's all about just being organized with your processing speed. There's no wrong answer with doing everything separately on the track alone. It's just not very organized and your computer is going to really have a hard time running if you have duplicate plugins on every track. When it comes to harmonies, and in context this example, I would compress these harmonies together. I might add some reverb or I might add some more delay. But typically I would compress these so they all crunch together. Not crunch, but they're squishing together more. And that, yeah, I might bus out some reverb or I might bus out some delay, for example, just to test out what it might sound like. Now that we're just on the idea of folders and summing stacks, I just should quickly talk about groups as well and what groups are because they're different. Groups are actually, you can group tracks together and then whatever you do to one track will affect another track. And you can tell Logic what you want to affect as well. So let's take a look at the guitars as an example. We'll just use 2 tracks. Open up our mixer by pressing X, and you can see our shaded tracks here. We have this group, a section, and we can click in and have a new group, group 1. Now you can see it both says 1 here, and something popped up over here. You can see groups. Name this guitars. Press enter, and now I can press X, and you can see it says guitars. So what happens now is, here's where we can actually tell Logic what I want to affect in the group. So if I just want to affect the volume, for example, so that means whatever I do to this will affect the other one. See, I'm moving the volume up. It's going to relatively change the volume of this guitar as well. But if I want to change the sends, or I want to change the color, all of these things will change when you affect one. So that's the benefit of groups. I primarily use groups for sends and volumes because volume is important. If you're going to raise one up, you relatively want to change the one that's with it because you want to make sure things are balanced well. Number 66 is organizing third-party plugins. So you've probably, if you have a lot of third-party plugins, here's what your workflow is like. You go down, you want to add a third-party plugin, you have to go to audio units, find the manufacturer, go in the manufacturer and figure it out that way. It can be quite annoying sometimes because you don't know, remember, who made what, right? If you want an EQ, was it an EQ that FabFilter made or was it an EQ that Isotope made? Okay, how do you organize this? You can do this in the plugin manager, which is at the top here, Logic Pro, Preferences, Plugin Manager. And here is where we can organize our plugins. Let's say, for example, I use the FabFilter EQs. I can just go to the FabFilter folder here, and then I can drag any of these plugins into the Logic categories here. So I've already done this here. You can see EQ. I've taken the Pro Q2 and put that in there. Let's do something else. So let's go to the Sound Toys. I use the Sound Toys decapitator a lot. So I'm going to bring that in to distortion. I'm just going to drag it in there. And now when I go to distortion, it's in here, decapitator. So what this means is, and you can go through all your third-party plugins, instruments too, and put them in different categories. Now I go to my audio track, and as soon as I go to my plugins, I can just go to distortion and then go to my decapitator right here and bring it up. I no longer have to go to audio units, Sound Toys, decapitator. So you can see it's just much faster instead of doing this to doing this. It's just going to save you a little bits here to save you lots of time. Let's say you want to reorganize that. You don't want the decapitator there anymore. Then let's go back to the preferences, plugin manager. You just have to go to distortion. Where is it here? And delete the decapitator by pressing backspace. You're not going to delete decapitator. It's still going to be within Sound Toys. You're just deleting it from, see it's right here. You're deleting it from that folder. So don't worry about just pressing backspace. And you can also do multiple at once, right? If you want to move all your FabFilter ones in there, you can go and do it that way. You can also add your own folder, say my vocal stuff or my distortions or my compressors. Let's say my compressors. And I go to, let's say I will use a FabFilter compressor. We'll put that in there. Where's my compressors? Then we go done, go here, and you can see my compressors. Number 67, we briefly touched on this idea before, but where the heck are all the files located about Logic on your Mac? How can you go in there and clean them up if you want to delete things? Just like any computer, it all runs throughout a hierarchy of files and folders, really. So go to a Finder window, and if you locate your root folder here and go down to Music, and then you can see Logic. This is where your Logic files are, but there's this thing called Audio Music Apps. And here is the money folder of where all your things are. Your plugin settings, your patches, your alchemy samples, your own samples. I don't even know what that is, articulation settings. But the thing I want to touch base on is your channel strip settings. So here we touched on this before. If you made a channel strip setting you want to delete, You can, for example, what one did we make before? I think it was an instrument performance. We made this modern classic. So I can go in here and just move that to trash. And now it's no longer there. I can go to the lead vox 2. We made that. I no longer need that. Move that to trash. And you can also make new folders in here. And you can create a folder. And you can set your own hierarchy, and that will work. You don't necessarily need to do that if you just like what's going on here already. Another folder, kind of secret folder, that you might need to know when you're installing plugins is the library. So if you go up to Go here, and you just actually hold down Option, see why I'm pressing Option, this thing shows up Library. Just hold it and click on Library. They kind of hide it because this is actually where things go down in your computer, and you can really, if you delete things and move things around, it's going to mess up your computer. So be cognizant of that. And you can go to Audio, Plugins, Presets, Sounds. This is where your plugins live and the presets of the plugins. So for example, the Fab Filter presets, if you have Trillion or any VST, it's going to go down in here. When you install plugins, it should do this all in the back end for you. But sometimes, for example, when I installed Trillion once, I had to go in on the back end here and like move a component around or something. Number 68 is, let's talk a little bit more about mixing now. This first little shortcut tip here, not a shortcut, more of a tip, is the mid side option on an EQ, or actually on any plugin. On the plugin, you can, on an EQ in Logic, you can see there's an option here. Right here, processing stereo, left only, mid only, side only. So mid side is popular, like mid only would be, if I now change this, and I actually EQ, maybe a bell curve like this. This actually dip in 7 dB at 1500 hertz here only affects the middle sound. So if you have an instrument that's panned to the left or the right, it won't affect that frequency on the sides. It's only going to affect anything in the middle. Otherwise, if you wanted to affect only the things on the sides, you would go side only. Or if you only want to affect the EQ on the left, right only, or left only. How I might want to use this in context is if I'm finding that with the vocal, because the vocal is mono, it's right at the middle, that maybe I have a synth bleed or a piano or something that I want to just still have present, but I don't want to be fighting with a vocal, I might do a dip, maybe at 500 hertz, right? Or between 500 and 1000. And I might do mid only. So it's not affecting the width of the piano at that frequency. It's only affecting the middle, which will leave more space for the vocal there. So that's what mid side is in an EQ. And whenever you open up a plugin, you'll see in Logic, like you can also do dual mono on everything, right? Or stereo. So if you do dual mono on something, this is going to give you the option of affecting the left signal or the right signal. And now if you go and do stereo on something, it's just going to affect the whole stereo image. So dual mono and stereo is the option. If you're wondering what to choose all the time, choose dual mono. If you want to say, I only want to affect the right side, or I only want to affect the left side, or, so that's what I would use dual mono. I don't, to be honest, when I'm producing, I don't really do the dual mono thing. I will just do stereo and then, but I will do mid side with EQing. Now a little side thing with the Logic EQs, for example, I did this little bell here and at mid only. If I do like a low cut here, it's doing also only mid only. With the Pro Q2 EQs, you can actually have only this one. You can isolate this specific band down here to be mid side, and then I can choose mono. So there's a little M here. And this band is not affected, is just affecting the stereo image, everything. And only this is affecting the mono. So you can just isolate it a bit more. That's just a plug-in difference between the Fab Filter, which like really focus on making great EQs. The Logic one is just your stock Logic EQ, so it's a bit less flexible. Let's X that down and get on to number 69, which is busing tracks at the same time. This is pretty fast and easy. You have two tracks that you want to send to the same buses. You can do this at the same time. So if I have a bass track here, and I also have another, let's say a sub bass, and I want to send these to the same reverb. Well, I can send reverb, right? I can go over to the sub bass and send a reverb actually to my bass verb, and I can just send a little bit like that. But if I want the same thing, if I want the same send here, I can actually do that at the same time by just, let me just remove that. All you have to do, we could group them like we did before in the same tip, but if it's just the send you want, and you don't want to have them matched up later on, you can just highlight them, go send, bass verb, make a little bit, and now both of them will have that send. The sub bass will have it and the bass will have it. So you can, and if you highlight again and bring them down, they'll also both go down. If you highlight tracks together, it's kind of like a temporary grouping in a way with sends and volume. The same thing with volume. You can highlight them and this will relatively change the volume. Tip number 70 is using shift click in the mixer window. If you are using the mixer window a lot, like I was saying before, I don't use the mixer window so much, but if you are, this is a good tip for you. If you want to know where bus 9 is, just press shift click on bus 9, and that's going to highlight this square with a white, well, it's like a white rectangle that went around. I'll do that again so you can see it in action. Shift on this one and this little white square here. So then you know, oh, this is the bus. Okay, I can go and add a new plugin, or I can go and add a send here. That's really handy when you have like hundreds of tracks and you were like, where the heck is bus 9 or this bus? And you go over and you have so many buses, you don't know where they are. So just go over, shift click, and it's going to bring you over to that exact thing. It's really only good if you're doing it in the mixer window, because you can also just do it like we were saying earlier in the inspector window. So if we're on the sub bass in our session window here, I can just click it here and I'll know shift click here and I'll know it will show up here. So for me, I'm always just working in inspector and session view. Again, I'm rarely opening up the mixer. Number 71 is creating a track from a bus track to do certain things on this bus track. Specifically, in this case, in our example, automating things. Let's say for our purposes, we have this, let's say, where is this reverb, this big verb here. And we have a lot of tracks being sent to this big reverb. And we want to automate this reverb on everything in our song. So we can create a track with this aux track. We can go Control T, or you can also right click and you can see create track, it's Control T. So let's create this track. And if we go back to our session view here, we'll see big verb. If it's like any other track, we can do things to it. We can add plugins and we can automate things. So just like we did in automation, we can go right away to latch and we can automate something. We can also press A and we can maybe click on the mix, and now it says mix in here. So now we can click in, we can use our, let's say we want to automate the reverb down in the chorus to make it more dry. Let's make a square here, click, and we'll bring the mix down in the chorus. And now keep in mind, every track that's being sent to this reverb will go down in the chorus. Number 72, using analog EQs in Logic for free. You know the EQ, you can also click this box and that will bring up an EQ for you. We've talked a lot about this EQ already. Here in EQ, we have this vintage EQ collection, and these are modeled, these are free in Logic. Console, graphic, tube. Let's open up all three just so you can see what they are. And these are all, oh, I had link on, so I couldn't even open them up. But now we can open them all three. These are all just EQs modeled after professional hardware EQs. I'm not sure which ones they're modeled after, but I know they are modeled after something. I believe this one is modeled after the Neve EQ, I believe. Anyways, they have different flavors. Why use different EQs, you might ask? Like, well, The same question goes, why might you ride a different type of bike? Or why might you use a different type of guitar? They all do the same thing. Bikes all get you to the same place, and guitars will all, every guitar is a guitar. The same thing goes with EQs. You can use a different EQ because it's just a different thing. It has different color, different flavor. Guitars have different wood, bikes have different colors, different types of, parts on them. It's exactly the same thing with EQs. These EQs here they're non-color EQs. They're just for shaping sound, great for subtractive things like taking away frequencies and stuff. These kind of EQs actually have a color. That's why you can like boost certain signals and will give it a certain flavor. And what I mean by that flavor, color, those kind of words, try it out and see what it does to your sound. This one I really like. And I also really like this one. I very, very, very rarely use this one here. I might do some high gains in this one. I might do some high boosts, and then I use the drive function and the different presets here. Both will sound different, and that's why people use different EQs. That's why people have hardware EQs and on their desks and that certain thing. It's just another added flavor of things. I'm gonna press Shift and close both these plugins down. 73, hiding tracks. We touched on this briefly when we were talking about bouncing. You can hide tracks at any time by pressing H. Just press H and it's going to bring up these H's on this window. When you press H, the hidden tracks will be in green. When you press H again, the hidden tracks that were in green are now hidden. So whenever you want to hide, and you can click and drag things, I can hide everything right now. Now it's a lot cleaner, right? And I can bring those back and press H again. And now those are not hidden. I hide tracks a lot when I'm not using them and I want to forget about them just because it clears my headspace. But keep in mind, when you hide tracks, they will still be active in the background. Logic has no idea that they're, where they've gone. Basically, if you're going to hide them, make sure you mute them because they'll still play in the background. Oftentimes, I'm like playing a song and there's some weird sound and I'm like, where the heck is that sound coming from? And then I open up H and I realize, oh, I didn't mute something that was hidden. So you got to mute it if you're going to hide it. And if you are thinking about hiding, you should also think about freezing because that's also just going to save you computer power. And if it's hidden, it's kind of like making it inactive in a way, but it is not inactive if you hide it. You need to freeze it and mute it, then hide it. That's what would be my recommendation. Number 74, muting regions. This is quick and easy and often very beneficial if you don't want to mute the entire track, but you want to mute a region. Click on the region and then press Control M. Now that region is muted. So in context, sometimes I do this because let's say I'm working on this between the chorus and the verse here into the pre. And I'm like, I'm not sure if I want the guitar there yet. So I'm going to cut it here and mute this. And so because I need the guitar here, right? I want it to play through and go into the pre-chorus, but I'm not sure if I want to produce it in the middle there yet. But I'd rather, instead of just deleting it and having it gone, I'd rather have it there just so I know to myself in the future, oh, I'm not sure about it if I want it there or not. Maybe I'll go back and do Control M and have a listen. But sometimes if you just delete it, you'll forget about the idea that you actually might want to have it. So that's how I use the region mutes. Number 75 is splitting MIDI files or MIDI tracks onto their own separate tracks. And this mostly has to do with drummer tracks specifically. So if you are working in drummer tracks, so if we add a new drummer track here at the top, and we have this little yellow thing, there's a couple things we can do here to actually get this into MIDI. If we right click, go convert to MIDI region, and now that yellow thing, that yellow drummer track is now MIDI data. So if we solo this, have a listen, it's the same thing as what that was. Now we can go back on that if we want to. We can go right click, convert, and convert that to drummer region. And it's the same thing if we want to go back into the editor and edit it again. So don't worry, you can always go back on that. However, let's change it to MIDI again. So right click, convert to MIDI region. Now let's separate each of the elements in the drum set into their own file. And we can do that by right-clicking, MIDI, separate by note pitch. Now we have every drum thing in their own track here. Let me just solo that again. So everything is on their own track. Now I think this is a Logic bug, but whenever you want to solo one instrument, like the kick, the snare or something, it solos everything else. So you actually can't listen to the element individually. And when you add a plugin to one track, for example, distortion, it adds it to every other track. And that seems very wrong, and I think that's a bug. Let's backtrack a bit. Let's delete this and start from scratch with a new drummer track. And I'll show you a better way to approach this if you want to work with drummer tracks in Logic. So go to the library, and when you choose your drummer track, you'll notice that you have like the options here, but at the bottom you have these things called producer kits. And then it's basically it's the same names, Bluebird, Brooklyn. These are the same names as you saw in the drum kits, right? We have East Bay, Bluebird, Brooklyn, Detroit Garage, East Bay. If we go to producer kits, it's the same thing. Bluebird, Brooklyn, there's a couple of new ones, but they all have pluses beside them. So these pluses mean when we click on this drummer track, it gives a folder for us. So these things are already, let me just make some space here. These things are already separated into their own elements. So this is a great way if you want to use drummer tracks because it's going to give you more flexibility to mix. Now, when we move this over, in order to get these down in the their respective fields here, there's a couple of things we can do. We need to take this MIDI region and drop it down to the overhead section. And you'll see by automatically doing that, it's changed it to MIDI. Now, what we can do is bounce this track in place. And I'll show you what's going to happen when we do that. File, bounce, track in place. And then we want to make sure include instrument multi-outputs as additional tracks. So we want to make sure this is clicked. It's important. And normalize overload production only. Okay. Now watch what will happen here. Bouncing. So it's split into audio, their respective files. So we have our kick where we can solo it, have a listen. We can have our kick out, our snare bottom, snare top. And we have all the elements here. So now we have the flexibility to process and solo out each element here. We don't have the flexibility to change the sound anymore in the yellow editor as you would in the drummer track. So if you're going to do this, make sure that the pattern you have at the top here, where it was in yellow, if I just Command Z a bunch of this, make sure this thing here is the pattern you actually like. Then you can drop it down, bounce it in place, put those all into audio tracks, and then you can process and mix it with your song properly. If you want to do this with the step sequencer, it's the same thing. This is what I usually do because I'm making my drums in the step sequencer with samples most of the time. So I would go track, if I just get a drum machine designer up here quickly, and I'll show you something simple. And we're just gonna, this is my drums, and I'm going to make actually I'll just use a Logic drums, the 808 Flex, and I will open up the step sequencer by pressing E and clicking step sequencer. Now I'll make a simple beat. And here they're in yellow, right? And if I click down, they won't be on the tracks as well. So same thing like we did before, right click, convert, and remember all the fields that you recently used will be at the top here, but for reference, convert to MIDI region, right click again, MIDI, separate by note pitch. And now we have them in here where we can solo them out and process them differently. Number 76 in the category here is project settings productivity. What things can you do in your settings to make it more efficient? And this one has to deal with when you open up Logic. If you've ever opened up Logic before, it always opens up the previous project that you've had, right? And that's can be annoying because you want to start a new project. Why is it always opening up the old project? But maybe if you like that, then don't change it. You can skip this tip because we're going to show you how you can open default projects up in Logic. So how do you do that? Go to the top here, go to Logic Preferences General. And here we have project handling. Make sure that's clicked. We have startup action. Create new project using default template. This is what I have. And then I've chosen the default template here, which is my production template. So you're going to likely see probably open most recent project. You probably have that. That's by default. So go here. You can have it ask what you'd like to do. You can create a new empty project. Maybe that's the best. Or open most recent project, open existing project. It doesn't matter. For me, I like to get started with creating I have just a default template of what my productions are. And if I know I want to open up a recent project, then I'll just go to my Finder window and I'll go to my Logic folder, which I've put on the side here, and I'll reference the actual project that I want to open. Simple, but an efficient tip. Before that, I would always just open up Logic, would open up the most recent project. Then I would have to go up here, open again, or open recent. And it was just taking up, a few minutes of your time to make you less efficient. Number 77, have you ever opened up Logic and it asks you, we can't locate this file, and you have to either locate it or skip it, and you're wondering why, and it's annoying. It's just another thing you don't want to have to worry about. So where can you find those files to locate, or how can you ignore that? So here's how you can stop that. Go to Logic, and if you go to the top here in your file browser, these are all the files that you have in Logic and files that you can import. So if you go to project here, we have project and all files. So it's a perfect example. These ones with kind of orangey red exclamation marks, Logic can't find those files, and it's saying something happened along the way. We can't find them. Do you want to locate them, or do you want to ignore them? So for me, I don't need those files because I'm not using them in this session. So I can just right click and delete them. I'm backspacing. I don't need this one. Click backspace. Click backspace. Then I won't get the notification of saying, hey, do you want to locate these files, or do you want to skip them? It's fine if you want to just skip them. However, if you need to locate them, then you have to go on your computer somewhere and actually locate that file and just link it up to this section so Logic can bring it back into the project. Number 78 is expanding your most recent files. So file, open recent. So you might only see 5. I think I have this as 10. You can even make this more. And it's just a quick way to get back to old files. Go to Logic Pro, Preferences, General, Project Handling again, and recent items, System Default, or you can have that as 50 if you want. That seems... I actually have it as the system default, so that's fine for me. Similarly, on this, in project handling, number 79 is increasing the amount of auto backups that your system makes. So actually, that's almost a tip on its own. You do have auto backups. So if you make a mistake and you're like lost a bit, you've done too many editings, you can't undo anymore, you've passed the amount of undos you can do, go up here, File, Revert To. These are all auto backups that your system makes, and you can say 10. I have 10 backups here, and they're all timestamped with when that backup was made. This is something Logic does in the back end. You don't have to worry about making these backups. However, if you want to increase the number of backups you have, you can do this in Preferences, General, Project Handling again, and Auto Backup. Last 10 alternate versions, last 100 alternate versions. This feature has saved me often where I've just made too many mistakes and I'm too deep. I've done too many things that I'm a bit lost, that I need to revert to something, maybe an alternate version the day before or the morning, where I can get back to something. Number 80 is project alternatives. This is a great feature in Logic. You can have multiple versions of this project in the same file. So everything is named retrograde at the top here. This is the name of the file. However, we can have different versions of this project with totally different ways things look. For example, file, I'll show you where it is, project alternatives. We have this one thing here, retrograde. If we make a new alternative, let's say in context how you would use this. So let's say this is the produced version of the song. I might make a new alternative to mix it, and I'll keep this as it is. Nothing will change with this one. File, project, new alternative, and then I might say retrograde mix 1. Okay. And now you can see here at the top, retrograde mix 1. So I can go now and make changes to this without affecting the other alternative. Let's delete this Bluebird file. Let's delete this piano at the top here. We've made some changes. Now we can go back to project alternatives and go back to retrograde. And it's going to load up the new retrograde. And now we have everything. It didn't touch any of this. So don't worry if you delete files, if you change the processing, you change everything. It's a completely new project within the same logic file. So I would recommend doing that instead of going up here and like duplicating the project and then having 2 files of the project. Just have it in the same project and use project alternatives. If you want to, you can always edit the alternative names here, edit alternatives, and you can go in and rename the alternatives if you need to. Number 81, have you ever named your project terribly at the start because you don't have a name for your song yet, and then you have this silly name for the whole time for your logic file? No problem. You can change that. This happens to me because whenever I start a song, I don't know what the name of the song is, so I'll save it as something like song session June 25th or something. So then when I know the name of the song, I go to project management, rename, and then I'll rename the song. So when you are in your Finder window in the Mac, it will now look like that. Number 82 is using project templates to increase your productivity. I briefly mentioned a couple tips before that I default open up a project template when I open up Logic. Let's start from scratch here. So this is what you would see if you're starting a new project in Logic, right? New project, recent, starter grids. By the way, you can start with a full-on grid that Logic gives you. Tutorials, there's a demo project here. The one thing I want to talk about though is templates. So Logic gives you a hip-hop, electronic, songwriter, orchestral, music for picture, and a multi-track template. Cool, you can start with those. However, my templates is the thing that I want to cover, and I have a production template and a songwriting session template. So let's open up the production template. What a template is, it just is a saved Logic file with things already in place, ideally, that you can get started with the ground running. So I can right away just get going, playing something on the piano, arm this track, get an idea out. I have plugins on the tracks ready to go. I have an EQ, a compressor, some distortion ready just to be turned on and edited if I need to. I have my vocal chain set up. I can turn that on and edit that if I need to. I have the bus sends ready. Things are in place for me to just kind of click on and get going right away. The other thing with templates you can save are the sends and your routing. For example, if I just go to any track here, I have a Juno synth, and then I have these sends. You can see I have all these sends that are ready to go in this template. It's like when you open up a Logic session and it's an empty project, these will likely be empty, right? And this whole window is going to be empty. So for example, if I start playing some piano and let's just say, let's just record a couple, like a chord here. Cool C. Okay. I'm getting started on this song idea. It's not a great song idea, but the idea is here with the template is now, I'm like, oh, I want to add some reverb to that. I can add a big reverb. And you know what? I want to really make it wider. I can add a widening effect to that. And already, it's going to help you produce a lot faster if you can save some routing in your templates. And I would save reverbs, I would save delays, I would save chorus effects and making things wider like that. Number 83 is taking the Logic sound library and putting it on an external drive. This is often helpful because you don't have enough space on your computer, or it's just making your computer run slowly. It is a lot of space. I think the sounds make up almost 50 or 60 gigabytes. So if you want to put that in a different external drive, go up here, Logic Pro, Sound Library, and then relocate the sound library. So just click that, and you can see here are some of my drives that I have locked into the computer, and you can just click one of the drives and put it there. I do recommend the G Drive mobile drives. I like them a lot. This one here, actually, I shouldn't unplug it because it's connected. It's like 2.5 inches wide and like a centimeter in height, and it's like 2 terabytes, very sturdy. And it's an SSD drive, so it works really, really fast. In general, though, when we're talking about putting things on external hard drives and having space, I think it's important that you do stay organized as much as you can with this kind of stuff. So it is a good idea, if you're going to be in this music production world for a while, to invest in an SSD, a hard drive with 2 terabytes or even more, and where you can have your samples on it, where you can do backups of your projects with Time Machine. For example, up here, I have auto backups with Time Machine on. It just backs up all my Logic Pro projects, so I know I'm not going to lose anything. Number 84 in project settings and management is using bookmarks in your file browser on the right side. So again, we can press F and open this up. And then we have this bookmark here. Whatever sounds you use a lot, you put it in your bookmarks. If you want to put a bookmark in, navigate to your house, your home here, go to where you want, let's say this Acoustica, you want this folder in your bookmarks, right click, and then you can say add bookmark Acoustica, and that's going to show up in there. Number 85 is overwriting any shortcuts you have in Logic. This is, I don't know if all DAWs do this. I know for a fact Pro Tools doesn't do this overwrite shortcut features, and it can be good and bad to, I think, do this as a DAW. It's great because you can really customize your own workflows. It's not as great if you go to a studio and they're using Logic and then you're not used to their shortcuts because you don't have them. So I wouldn't, if I can make a piece of advice to you watching this right now, not to go overwrite everything in Logic, but if there's something you want to customize a shortcut for you, you can go and overwrite it. So go Logic Pro, key commands, edit. And then you can see here, these are all the key commands in Logic. You can see there are hundreds. So you can use this as a learning tool and just search for something, and maybe there's a key command for it already, and you can use that. So a key command that I overwrote was Shift-1, and I don't even know what I overwrote anymore. But what I do with Shift-1 is when I'm on a track and I press Shift-1, that's going to open up the first plugin on the chain. And for me, it's most of the time, all the time, except maybe on vocals, it's an EQ. So if I know quickly I need to EQ something, I'll go to my bass, press Shift-1, and now I have the EQ. Go to my guitar melody, Shift-1, and I might be closing it down. However, like we were discussing before, if you have the paper click on and you're doing this type of EQ, you don't need to press Shift-1 at all. You just need to go to guitar melody, and now it will shift to this EQ. That has to do with where the plugin is on the chain. And I actually got this tip from another YouTube video. They are Echo Soundworks, and I thought that was a really, really valuable tip that's improved my workflow with just quickly opening up plugins. It doesn't have to be EQs, and it doesn't have to be this as well. The idea is that you can overwrite anything. If you do something a lot, think of overwriting it or trying to find out what the shortcut is. Number 86 is changing the default answers to some of the notifications you get in Logic. So in this example, specifically in context, I have a Bose speaker over here, and sometimes when it's on, Logic says like, hey, do you want to use the speaker as your default device while I'm producing a session? And it's annoying, so you can change the default answer so you can quickly just press enter and get rid of that notification. Go to Logic Pro Preferences, General, then go to Notifications, and you can see here, do you want to use the audio device Bose Color Sound Link? You can have it as use if you want to quickly say use all the time that it comes on, or don't use. Check your notifications there. You might have some more that I don't have, and then you can change those default answers just to save a bit of time. Number 87 is recording pre-roll and auto colorizing takes inside the project settings. I mentioned this before, but if you haven't watched the video before, we have Logic Pro Preferences, which is kind of like global preferences, and then in File, we have project settings. So this is different. We have different settings here we can get specifically in the project. So if you open up General, again, you'll get them all at the top here. So these are different windows, right? We can go File, Preferences, General, not to be confused with Preferences and Settings. We have Preferences at the top, and then we have Settings. So I'm talking about settings now. So in recording, when you're recording, you can count in a bar. Like we can change at the top here with this 1, 2, 3, 4. We can also count in, multiple bars. What I'm talking about here is record pre-roll, where you can actually have Logic record 3 seconds before it starts, or 4 seconds before it starts. For me, I like the count in, and I'm okay by having a bar and then choosing it with what I have at the top here. And you can allow tempo change recording, and you can auto colorize takes. This is handy if you make multiple takes. Eventually they're all in blue, and I like to have them with different colors when I'm making different takes, just so I can know, like, hey, I like the red one, but I didn't like the blue one, and then I can remember that. So I'll show you what record pre-roll is in action. So if you record pre-roll with 3 seconds, and we go to an audio track and just record something basic in here, we'll just go input 2 because I don't want to record my voice. And we'll just solo that and record something. So we're just waited 3 seconds before it actually started recording. You can see if I just delete that and I change that to 0 seconds, you'll see it just starts recording right away. And I press R, it just starts recording. So sometimes you might want that if you would just rather start it having record. So okay, if I want to record a guitar here, I'll just know personally that I'll go a bar before and just press record, and it will go there. If you'd rather have that type of workflow, I just got used to saying, like, if I want to record a vocal that starts at the chorus, I know I'll just have to put my playhead there and press record, and then Logic will start it here a bar before, because I've told them I want it to go in a bar. If we record over this, it will be different colors. Now we have a blue and or yellow, I guess, and an orangey red. Number 88 is if you don't like take folders. In Logic, you can change what happens when you record over another audio take. So by default, when you record, we just saw that when we auto colorized in the tip before. If we record over this, now I have the count in. So just gonna record for 1.5 bars, and then record over, and will be different colors like we saw in the tip before, but also by default, Logic is gonna create this take folder. You can snap it up, and I do like take folders, but I am switching it sometimes depending on what type of recording I'm doing. So you can go to not the project settings, but the preferences. And for now, I'm not gonna go Logic Pro preferences anymore because this is taking time. The shortcut to get preferences up quickly is Command comma. So I'll reference that now for the rest of the video. And then I would go Command W to bring that down. So Command comma, preferences up, Command W to bring that down. Here we are in recording and overlapping track recording. So we're dealing with audio in this example. If the cycle is off, create a take folder. Okay. If the cycle is on, then create tracks and mute, or create track alternatives. Let's do create track alternatives. So in this case, if I delete both of these, put the cycle on, record, let's say I'm doing some vocal takes here, singing. I forgot to mention as well a brief tip of the pre-roll before. If you want to do a hack pre-roll, you can just press spacebar and R when you're recording. So I usually am on count in, and I'll press R because I have the cycle here, and it's going to go through, right? But let's say I wanted to just start the recording right here. I can press spacebar and R, and it's going to start right here. So that's great in context if I'm doing my own vocal takes and I already have a line, a vocal part that I like here, but I just want to re-sing this part. Then I'll save time. Instead of starting the recording from here, I'll just go spacebar R, and then I can sing there. And notice while I've been doing this, there's no take folder over here, but you'll notice there's alternatives. And up to G now, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So we can go back to A take, we can go to B take. And if you prefer to work in that, you can. And we can always go, you can say show inactive, and then you'll see the takes here. So if you want to do a quick comp, you can just go through them like this. If you want to look at A, just press A and press play. And then if you want to snap out, just press the X at the top and you're back up with F. And this is with cycle on, by the way. So if we have cycle off, it's still going to create a take folder. So if we press R, it now will create a take folder with these take alternatives. It's getting a little meta here. So there'll be a take folder with 2 takes and one has a massive alternative in it. So we have take 2, then we have take 1, which includes all the alternatives. So it's a bit meta. Same thing for MIDI. You can create take folders, you can merge, overlap, creating track alternatives, and the same thing with cycle on. Number 89 is customizing your control bar and display. How do you customize it? Go to the drop down here and go custom. This is I have a custom one in place, but you go to customize control bar and display. Here you just click on the things you want in this entire top bar. It's not just this window, by the way. It's this entire top bar. Let's go back here. And I'm just going to unclick the things I don't want. The library, yes, I want that. The inspector, I want that. Question mark, I want that. The toolbar, I want that. I'll keep these because I do sometimes click them. Rewind and fast forward. Do I ever use those? No. So here they are, rewind, fast rewind. I never press stop or play with that. I'm always using the space bar. Sometimes I press record there. I never press cycle. So I'll remove that. And I'll leave capture recording off right now. We will get into capture recording in a little bit. The custom LCD. For me, I like the positions. I like to know where I am. The locators, I don't really use the locator, so I'm going to have that off. The sample rate, I don't need this 44.1. For me, I'm okay to know what I had that in settings. Vary speed is something I won't get into now, but you can increase or decrease the entire speed of your track. I don't need that. Tempo, I really like to have the tempo. And the time signature and division, I do like to have that because I want to know the value of the grid I'm looking at. Key signature, I really like to have because I'm constantly referencing the key signature. MIDI activity, I like to have because whenever I press my keyboard, I want to know if the logic is referencing it. Performance meter is good because I want to look at my CPU thing. If it's like crazy, if it's going out crazy, I know that I have to freeze tracks or do something. And then we have all these other things we can add. What I know, I won't go through all of them now, but what I would recommend adding, you might want to add if you're recording, you might want to add this low latency mode and this software monitoring button. Software monitoring is when you click that, you'll be able to hear yourself in your headphones. It's the same button here as what you would press in preferences. If I open Command comma, go to audio and go to general system monitoring. It's the same button. See if I click this here, it turns green. Low latency mode is just going to do some kind of algorithm on the back end that's going to save as much possible speed or processing speed as it can to help you get a lower latency on your recording. And latency is just the time it actually takes from the sound to get from it where it's being played or where you're singing to where it comes out and is in Logic and what you can hear in your system monitoring. So I'd recommend doing low latency if you're going to do system monitoring because you don't want to hear your voice and it's like a little delayed. It can be annoying. You could put everything up there if you want, and over time you'll gravitate towards things you like to use. Number 90, let's talk about buffer size a little bit. We mentioned low latency in the previous tip. So buffer size happens to do in preferences, general, and audio, devices. I always have 1024 unless I'm recording, and then I'll bump it down to 128 if I find the latency to be too slow, then I'll bump it down to 32. And if that's too slow, I might change an interface. If you don't know what buffer size means, the lower you go, the lower latency you're going to have. The higher you go, the higher latency you're going to have. Once I'm committed to sound, bounce it, and that will help reduce latency as well when you start recording audio. This all comes kind of down to the point where you're ready to record vocals. So if you have your track ready, you have a vibe going, and you have 10 different tracks or 20 different tracks with 20 different software instruments, It's not a good idea to record vocals with all the software instruments live. You should freeze them all, or you should bounce them all and then do vocals. The other thing is, if you don't want to do any of that, bounce the entire project. So from here, just go Command B and bounce it as an MP3 or a wave, and then open up a brand new Logic project. So go File and new from template, or new project completely, an empty slate. Import the wave of your song and then record vocals in that brand new session. I do this a lot of the time unless my session is mostly audio and it's not heavy on the computer. That way I know that I can record vocals. I can record lots of different vocals, because as soon as you start recording with your computer, you want the focus to be on the recording, all the CPU power to be on the recording. Number 91 is undo settings. So if you are in a hole, we talked about this before with backups, but if you are in a hole and you made some mistakes and you want to just, Command Z isn't working for you anymore, you can go back up here, edit, undo history, and it shows you an entire history of when you did edit, undo, or Command Z. Now I use this in context if you want to go Command Z, but you don't want to press it like 5 times because you liked what you did up until that point, but maybe like 5 steps before that you wanted to undo that one. Here's where you would go in and change it. So you can see it's 11:25 and 11:11 we did a switch take or comp, and you can see it's highlighted that for me. If I go to toggle take folder disclosure and click that, and it's highlighted what I did there, and I can go and undo that specific task. It's really handy for stuff that you do with plugins or in the mixer window, and that's why you can include parameters from mixer or plugin. So if you just did stuff with your plugins, then you can just go and look what you did with your plugins and then undo something there. So when in doubt, you want to change something that you've done in the past. Maybe it's just one thing, but you don't want to change anything you've done up until that point. Go to your edit, undo history, look for the thing, whether it's in your mixer or the plugin, and look for that thing and undo it. But don't hold this undo button. Number 92 is division markers in the display window. I talked a little bit about this when I was going into the LCD custom display here, this number 4, and where I'm switching it sometimes. So what this number has to refer to is the actual display window here. Let's zoom in on right before the chorus. Let's just zoom in here. We have at quarter notes here, and that's what these lines are. So if we zoom in more, it's only going to show a line on that marker you choose at the top here. So it's quarters. So it's going to be, you're only going to have quarter lines. And this is helpful if I'm producing something here, hi-hats, whatever. I would put the right timing. So maybe it's 16ths. And now I have 16th lines. So I can say like, hey, I need my vocal to be in time on this 16th note. Then I can drag it to this line or whatever. So if you're wondering why your session here doesn't have a lot of lines and you want to have lines, bump it up, and then once you zoom in, you'll have those lines. Number 93, and now we're on a new section new category with recording. And this first one, which is 93, is actually just pressing K, which stands for click, even though it's spelled wrong. K, when you press K, it turns on the click. Super simple. You might know of this one already. It can happen in action while you're recording too. So if I have an audio track up and I'm recording a vocal and I'm actually like maybe recording in my chair right here, and I press record and I'm like singing, and halfway through the verse I'm like, oh no, I need the click, just press K. Now the click is on and I can continue recording and maybe save that take. I find myself in that position a lot because I don't always like listening to the click when I'm producing, right? So I'll solo that off and I'll press K to turn the click off, go record again, and it's off. So I have to go and press K. 94 is using live loops when you're recording, and just starting it with a session actually, to generate ideas and brainstorm. If you don't already know an idea of how you want to start a song, I don't recommend using live loops. If you have your song, you have the idea, you have certain parts, just get right into the session view here and start recording. However, live loops is a new feature in Logic within the last year, and it's great to get ideas. And so in a nutshell, live loops has these squares here where you can click these squares and record something in audio, MIDI, drummer tracks. It's all the same. You can still do it in in the squares here. Each square represents a different idea. So let's do a really quick example. If I just scroll over in the session, and if I am starting a song from scratch here, right? Go to bar 97, just so I'm not fussing with any of the track we have in place. And we can use Apple loops as an example. So I will load up a new audio track here and an Apple loop. And let's say we want to start with a piano. Okay, 70s rock piano. And we're going to take all these in 110 and in E major here. So some different ideas of rock pianos. Audio track again. And we're going to look for a bass in E major and 110 bass. And we'll filter by key. So going to E major. So scroll bar, go E. And we'll take this. We want something in the range of 110 because it's going to be stretched. So this is perfect raw garage bass. And the idea is we're trying to find ideas for a song. And I'm doing it with loops just because of the sake of this video. But you can be singing in these boxes. You could be playing things on your MIDI controller. You could be playing things. It doesn't have to be audio tracks. It can be drummer tracks. And it's meshing all these ideas and seeing how they work together. And then once you find some cool ideas that work together, you can record them into the session view. Let's just test and see how these ideas work together. Let's try this idea with this the bass right below it. Turn this one on. Okay, not really working together. Let's keep the bass running, but we'll switch the piano. So you can see the timing of it. I'll zoom in for you. You can see each is having their respective timing. So once this, and it's all based around the tempo and beats. So when this piano is almost done 4 beats, I'm going to switch it to this piano. It's going to happen in time. Ready? Now. So the bass hasn't stopped, but we switched the piano. Let's try this bass with this piano. 2, 3, 4. Now, so with live loops, everything is in time and is running in time, which is great to test new ideas because you don't have to fuss about the timing. You have to, when you play things will land on beat, and it just depends on where you press play to what beat you land on. For example, if we do that again, let's play the piano. And whenever you want to stop things, there's a stop button on this side here. So we're just playing the piano. And if I want the bass to land right on beat 1, I just have to time it mentally. 2, 3, 4, 1. But I can click it a beat before. It's not actually that bad. I'll try this piano coming in on beat 1, 2, 4. Okay, so let's say these are 2 ideas, and you might have multiple tracks here with different ideas, and you can go click through them, right? Simplicity case, let's say we like this, so we're going to want to record this in. So let's press ARM and record. So now I'm recording in the session view here. Nothing's happening because nothing is being played inside this view. So let's say I want an intro with this rock piano, so I'll press play and it will start recording. You can see it coming in up here. Okay, so let's say this is kind of my intro. The bass. Okay, it doesn't sound too good, but I think you're getting the ideas. Maybe here we come in the next bar is a chorus piano. And we drop the bass out. So it'd be like this. And everything is recording in time. Maybe the next bar we come back and bring everything in. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we can shut this down, press stop at the bottom, close session view, or live loops view, sorry. And now we're in session view. We have 2 tracks and we have our idea where we can actually get in and start processing things. We can cut things, move things around, and you have more of a starting template with ideas that you've chosen. We can move on to tip number 95, which is changing the sound of the metronome. So the metronome here, you can go to metronome settings, and here you can actually choose what you want to hear the metronome to be. Is it just the bars and beats, or do you want the groups and divisions as well? The tone or the volume, and the output as well. So the output is valuable to use if you, in my case, I might route the metronome output to a different output if I want to hear the click in my headphones, but not out of the speakers. And why would you want to do this? This is good for a live performance if you want to have a click in your ear. If you're doing in-ear monitoring and you're using Logic on stage. I do that. So there's a click in my headphones that's routed out to a different output, but what I'm sending to the mix, the on-stage, mixer, they're getting a clean mix without the metronome. If we close this down and open up our mixer by pressing Command 2, we can also press X, but Command 2 opens it up in a big window, and you'll likely see single tracks all. You'll probably have it on tracks. If we go to all, we'll be able to see our click track, because basically that's what Logic's doing. It should be somewhere down here. Oops, I think someone is there, or the wind is coming through. So here it is. Click. And you can see it's default Klopfgeist, which is just a clicky sounding thing. You can go and change this to an alchemy synth, whatever you want. You could also go, probably, if you might want to, change it to a drum kit designer, but actually a drum kit. A drum synth could work. You could change it. You could change it to anything. Ultra beats, strings. It basically is just a software instrument. So you might want to actually go and change it to a drum kit, and you can actually choose the drum kit you want to hear. I leave it as the Klopfgeist. It's fine for me. I'm used to that kind of stuff. But if you're like really hate that sound, no worries. Go and change it here. Also, if you don't want to deal with that kind of stuff, you can kind of just work around it with just using a drummer track. Like if you add a drummer track here, they're in yellow and they're all in time already with your BPM. They're perfectly in time. So you could just kind of have this at the top and maybe do like a simple and soft drum set without fills, a simple pattern. This is essentially a click as well. And you can choose a pattern you want to play with. If that's going to get you in the mood and get you playing more in time, then do that, or change the Klopfgeist to a different instrument. Number 96 is setting the gain properly on your interface when you're recording instruments. Like, let's talk about vocals and guitar specifically. When you set up your vocal, let's say, now I'm coming into the interface right now. So I can go track, new audio track. This is how you would get going. And you want to set the gain properly. So get your input right. Make sure that the input here is the input that you have in your interface. Now, if I press I here, which is monitoring, I can see my voice coming in here. And I'm talking. If I talk louder, it jumps up more. So it's -11 here. If you're recording vocals, it's okay to record them in at around -10 if you want, even less. You could go a bit more if you want, but the idea is record vocals. You can always push them up later in post-production, but you can never, if you peak on a vocal, you can never bring that down. So it's okay to leave a lot of headroom, which is what that's called when you're recording vocals. If you're recording speaking vocals like me, I usually record them, -12, sometimes even -18, because I know it's just speaking and I can bring that up later. I'd rather not record so much of the room around me, because there's cars outside, and as you've heard throughout the video, there's sirens and stuff outside too. So the workflow of that is, once you have your input set up and you can see your instrument or your voice coming through here, then you would turn the gain dial on your interface while looking at it. So if I increase the gain here, it's going to increase the amount of green, and this number is going to get closer to -10, -5, and you don't want to get and you don't really want to get in that yellow range. This number is called the peak number, and it will stay at the highest number that it reaches. So if I just click, it's at -3 right now, right? And now I'm talking, and let's say I do that and I'm resetting the gain on my interface. If I don't click on this number, it's still going to be set at -3. So it's important when you are doing the gain thing to make sure you click on this number so you reset that. You have to reset it by clicking on it. If not, now I'm at 0 and I might be resetting the gain. I'm being like, wow, I'm still at 0? I'm so soft here. No, it's because that was the peak value of your most recent thing before you reset it. So reset it, set it, do a check, gain check, reset again, gain check, and that's the workflow to properly gain your gain before you start recording vocals. Number 97 is recording with quantization on. We talked about quantization earlier on in the video and how to do that and how to maybe make it more of a human feel and add a new software instrument track. No, not a drummer track. And if we go to our region editor and have quantize on, let's say by 1/16th or any of these values, let's just say 1/16th. Side note to this, if you click on quantize, you can see classic quantize and smart quantize. Classic is what most YouTube videos are about. It's how it's locking things in, classic quantization. Smart quantize will make it a bit more human. It will try to be smart to what it thinks you're trying to do. Maybe it might be cool to try that out. Sometimes it can go terribly wrong, but it also can make it more cool sometimes and more human. So worth trying out. Let's keep it in classic for now with this use case of what we're trying to do. Basically, I'm going to just change this to a drum track, and I'll show you that you can record with drums with quantization already in place. So I have my MIDI controller here, kick and snare. And while I'm recording, it's going to quantize it while I'm just doing it. If you play a little before the beat, the notes aren't going to happen. So you kind of have to be a bit delayed, and you'll see what I mean while I'm doing it here. Okay. Now, let me look at the MIDI data here. You can see everything is quantized by 1/16th note. Okay, number 98 is the sliding S and sliding M options that we have in Logic. Sliding S is, if you click on a track and you want to solo it, you can also click and hold and scroll down and you will solo all of this track. And you can also click and hold and unsolo the tracks. Same thing goes for mute, and the same thing goes for hidden tracks. If we open up the hidden tracks by pressing H, and we're like, you know what? I want to hide all those tracks. I'm just holding, clicking, and holding. Click and sliding, click and dragging, this type of functionality is really kind of a fundamental thing throughout Logic. Also works for volume and panning. So you don't have to pretend to go left with your mouse or right. You can just click and slide down, click and slide up. This one's fairly straightforward, but it works for volume too. You can click it and kind of go anywhere with your mouse. Like I can be down here and scrolling left or right. Just know that click slide works with things. It goes with this monitoring as well. Like we talked about previously in the video, if you haven't watched those sections, you can go option click to reset things. So if this is soloed, the guitar, the drums, and the synths, and we don't want to go up here to unsolo them, we can just go option click, and there you go. Number 99 is blowing up the signal while you're recording because you want to see the signal and how big it is. Also make sure that you're not being fooled by the size of the signal if you have this on. So it's up here. This is like the thing, you can click this on or off and it will make the signal fatter. If you hold that, it's going to bring up this sliding thing. So you can tell it how fat do you want to make it. Skinny fat or like really, really fat. And where you leave it is where it's going to be by default. The shortcut for that, if you click on a region, is Command plus, Command minus, Command plus, and you'll see the fatness. So what I was saying just a second ago, don't be fooled by the signal. For example, if it's like this and you think your signal is coming in nice and good, it's fat and you must have a lot of gain, don't be fooled because maybe this is on. So when you're just know the actual fatness of your signal before that's on. So this is what the signal fatness is. This is really helpful. While you're getting into the details, sometimes a signal won't even show depending on where you are. I'm going to blow this up and you can see, wow, there's some stuff in here. This is maybe a lip smack, this is air, this is room noise, it's whatever. You can go in here and cut that out if you want. And then I can fade these and we'll zoom out and we'll go to tip number 100, which is the notepad right here. I primarily use the notepad for lyrics if I'm writing a song, but if I'm producing, I'm not really writing lyrics. So what I would use the notepad for is I might be producing this bass line and I'll just make a note, bass edits. I got to come back and do bass edits and snap that back. If I don't make that note, I just might never make the edits in the bass because I won't remember it. Just so I don't forget these things. Those things will come up in your head. Where do you put them? Put them in your notes. Number 101, because why not do 2 more bonus tips because we've made it this far. Capture recording. If you are starting a session, let's say you're in a blank session here, let's just make some room, and you have a piano track up here, you press record, and you're like, let's get some of my good ideas down. You sit over on your controller and you start playing. You press spacebar because you want to click on, and you start playing a melody idea that comes to your head because you run to your computer and you're super stoked about it. So you click spacebar because you want to click on. Not a great melody, but then you're like, oh, I got it on. And you're like, no, I didn't record. That's okay. Logic is listening when the playback is on. So you just have to press this button with the circle around it and the red dot in the middle. And now it's here. It's exactly what I played. It's called capture recording. And in order to turn that on, we briefly mentioned it a couple tips before. Go to customize control bar and display, and have this on here, capture recording. And that will show up with a red dot with a white circle around it. Logic is listening right now, even though it's not recording. So here we go again. And we press capture record, and we have that in there. So don't worry if you didn't record. It's likely you still have it there in Logic, in their like kind of saved memory they have on the back end. Number 102, and the last tip in this long video. So just thank you for watching and making it this far in the video. And if you got anything from this video, would be great if you could give it a thumbs up and maybe a subscribe. This one is test out your mix with some mastering plugins on it. And what I mean by that is test it out with a compressor and test it out with a limiter, because this is going to give you the idea of what it will sound like more or less when it's mastered. Because when you master something, when you compress all the master chain and when you limit it, when you raise the gain, it's going to change the way your sound mix, or the way your mix sounds. You might have to go back in your mix and level some of the things differently. And so when I'm kind of near done on the mix, I'll just erase this track. Now this mix is going to sound bad because we've added so many things throughout this video. But let's just take a listen. That's not so bad. It's going to be fine for our purposes. So what you would do is go over to your master chain here. And if you don't see that here, just press shift and click stereo out. That's going to make it show up in this section. Don't worry about this, why it says -4.3 here. That's just because I'm recording and taking the output of Logic to make this video, and I don't want it to burst your ears when I play back. That's why this is low. So this should be at 0 for you. So what I would recommend, you put a compressor on there, and maybe just a Logic compressor if you don't have any paid compressors. Maybe use something like a classic VCA and compress the mix. So we're gonna have that needle jump to -3, -5, and see what that's doing to your mix. This is a test. We're not mastering our mix right now, but while we're mixing, and while we're thinking we're close to being done, we can test it with these plugins on to see if we need to rebalance things while things get louder. So put a compressor on there and then put a limiter on there. If you don't have like a paid one, a really good paid one is by FabFilter. It's called Pro L. If you don't have that, you can go, Logic has one too, yeah, limiter. And you can bump this gain up until it's really crunching things. Maybe you're reaching maybe -10 LUFS. And this is what I meant by LUFS. We want this number to kind of reach, I mean, the Spotify Pro songs, they'll reach -6 in loudness sometimes. This is a mastering discussion of how loud your master should be. Should you have a more, should you have a dynamic master? Should it be just crazy loud throughout? I'm not going to get into that. Just showing you where you kind of should put your master, just in terms of how we can reference it while we're mixing. So let's increase the gain. And keep in mind, because I have -4 dB, that I should normally have this at 0, right? But I'm keeping that down just so we don't hurt our ears in the video. As you might realize at this point, you might just realize that the snare is too loud and it needs to be taken down 2 dB, or you might realize something else needs to be EQ'd, or some things are fighting because the mix is changing and you haven't heard it with all that compression and limiting on it. So that is 100 Logic Pro tips, tricks, and shortcuts. Leave a comment, a question. I will get back to all of them with an answer if I know the answer. If you want to stick around for more videos, subscribe. I will make videos about Logic, music production, just to help you guys with your music production careers if you're in it for a career. I am a music producer myself. I'm also a singer-songwriter, and I have my own music online. So if you want to go check some of my own music, feel free to do so. I'll leave a couple of links in the description if you're curious. And I hope to see you in the next video.